that option, or there's nothing saying we can't use these lights. And so if you want to speak, you just turn your light on. So how do people feel about that?
Kicking you under the table is not an option.
Well, you can't reach.
Oh, these are long legs.
Maybe we can grow.
Actually, the
Okay,
hands
Becky.
seems like-
Yeah, same to me. Either's fun.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, okay. All right. So we'll try that and, we'll see how it goes. And I think we'll find that the meetings are even more efficient doing it that way. Anybody have any questions about the ethical standards or Robert's rules or anything like that, since we have the time to go over it?
I had something a couple months
Brandon?
ago.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Rogan. Do you want staff to raise, I mean, I try to anyways, but to raise hands as well to be recognized?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, I don't see any staff in the room except for Clerk Vasquez right now. But yeah, that would be
Okay.
great.
Yeah, and I apologize if that wasn't done at the last meeting on my part. I mean, I will still, if I feel like something that absolutely must be interrupted, I will still do so, as is my legal obligation, but I try to always
Yeah.
raise my hand at least.
Yeah, and that's what we pay you for, so. And Trustee Williams, you were saying something?
No, remote might be something in the back of my mind. Question I had a couple of months ago. It's not coming out. If it comes,
Raise your hand.
I'll raise my hand.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, that was easy. All right, so let's get on to the rights of nature presentation. We have Mr. Gary Wapner here and Mr. Lowell, the chair of the EAB. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm Greg Lowell, Chairman of the Ecology Board. I think I've met most of you. I just want to give you some background on the resolution we have before you. So we started entertaining this rights of nature proposal back in April. It was first brought to our attention by Bob Breckenridge, who's one of our Ecology Board members. We looked at it, we thought it was a good idea, and we massaged this resolution down from, good Lord, I think it was 6 or 7 or 8 pages down to what you see before you tonight. We hope it's concise. Gary's looked at it and there's an agreement on it. We hope you'll consider it. I think we all realize that the St. Vrain River is sort of the centerpiece of the town, both aesthetically, recreationally, and more importantly, economically. And we think that the rights of nature resolution, although it is somewhat limited in its legal aspects, and it doesn't really affect any of the current regulations that we have on the river, but what it does is instead puts the river in the forefront of any of your decisions you have, like respecting the river in any way. Gary Walker's here from State of Colorado. If I'm correct,
Yes.
you were the originator of this.
Yes.
In Colorado. So he's going to give a detailed description to give you some of the details and nuances of this. Don Cronin is in the back of the room here. He's the executive director of the St. Vrain
Close Water Conservancy.
Water Conservancy District, who was also instrumental in helping us craft this. So he was there.
Okay. Thank you all. Gary Wapner, our organization is based in Fort Collins, but I have a little house up by Netherland too, so I just came down and came. By the way, the leaves are just starting to turn on peak to peak. You got about another 3 days till we get yellow, and then you got, another 3 days till the mobs of people start running through town. It happens every year, I know. And I just walked down to the creek before the meeting, and it's great to see water in the creeks this time of year. Usually they're pretty dry right now, or more rocks than water. And there's still a lot of water. It's been such a beautiful right here. I was thinking last week about coming to give this presentation, and it's short, by the way, it's only 10 slides, so I'm not that long-winded. But my introduction, I did want to say that I just realized that I'm going to be here talking about the rivers should have a right to exist, and they're alive. In some places, they're actually treated like people. And it's sort of quite coincidental that we're at the 10-year anniversary of the floods, and of course, every town along the Front Range, but especially towns like Lyons, that your river is alive, and it rose up and told everyone that 10 years ago. And so, this is kind of tied to the concepts there. Rights of nature for rivers and watersheds. So the first slide here is, we're talking about creating over time, at least new environmental laws, although this is resolution, it's not a law. And people would say, well, what's wrong with our current laws? And at the federal level, most of the environmental laws are 50 years old or older. One of the strongest laws is the Endangered Species Act, but it really only kicks in when a critter is at the brink of extinction. The Clean Water Act is also, a moderately strong law, but just recently the Supreme Court whacked it down, so it's not as strong as it once was. The National Environmental Policy Act, these are the laws that I deal with as an environmental professional quite a bit. It's more about analysis than it is about actually protecting or saving anything. So those are really the laws we have, that relate to rivers at the federal level. At the state level, the state is Colorado is one of the entities that EPA turns over regulation of the Clean Water Act to. And so part of the state's job is to enforce the Clean Water Act, the Clean Water Act. It is fairly poorly enforced, I would say, at the state. I've been involved in a lot of issues for, a few decades now at the state. Sometimes they do good work in some places, sometimes less, I think. It's also subject to political manipulation. And at the local level, of course, Boulder County has 1041 regulations. They can be very strong when they actually exist and work. Sometimes they don't work at all. And so that is a whole nother bag of beasts. And of course, you guys, you have local regulations here to help protect and regulate, development along the creeks, et cetera. So there's a variety of environmental laws, but this is really about kind of creating a new paradigm in the legal world in terms of how we interact with nature. Sometimes it's called earth law, rights of nature. It's also often called ecocentric law, but it is an emerging body of law for protecting, restoring, and stabilizing the functional interdependency of Earth's life and life support systems. And it is a growing international movement, which I'll get to a little bit, including here a little bit in the state of Colorado. Rights of nature. It is designed to correct flaws within the current legal system. So it gives nature fundamental rights to exist, to thrive, and be free from pollution, et cetera. The general goal is to restore nature to health, but it also supports human rights and indigenous rights in particular, and other types of rights. In some places, it gives nature a voice because guardianship bodies can be appointed. I'll get to that in a little bit. It also can have political representation, so it gives the opportunity for nature to stand up before you and speak and as a person. And also it can be considered in decision making. So that's sort of a shift from how we normally think about nature as property to nature and having the right to exist in our political and legal system. This is a global movement, and it's really taken off the last 10 years, and even more so the last 5 years. There's a few countries with constitutional amendments. There's been a number of court decisions across the planet. And also in the United States, there's been a number of local ordinances across the planet. And it's actually taking probably more strength with an indigenous law in some places than in others. There was a recent conference just a few months ago on the Global Rights of Nature, Global Alliance for Rights of Nature, which we are a member of. And they identified more than 400 initiatives across the planet where various political bodies of people or organizations were trying to move forward rights of nature concepts for local bodies of water, local forests, et cetera. So what we're here tonight is to talk about rights of rivers, which is sort of a subset of rights of nature, and particularly rights for the St. Vrain Creeks, north and south. And the general concept is that the health of a community can be measured by the health of the river that flows through it. And of course, from an ecological sense, everything flows downhill. We're in a watershed, and so if you measure the ecological health of the river, it gives you actually a fairly good representation of what's going on in the community, because all the pollution flows down through the stormwater and all ends up in the creek, etc. And if you have biodiversity along the creek, it means that it's generally being protected in the watershed, things like that. So rivers in the rights of nature and rights of rivers movement, they generally talk about having a right to flow, which a right to perform essential functions within its ecosystem, a right to be free from pollution, right to feed and be fed by sustainable aquifers and glaciers, a right to native biodiversity, and a right to regeneration and restoration. A lot of those words are in the resolution that Greg was talking about that the Environmental Advisory Board voted to move forward to you. There we go. One of the first places, and wasn't that long ago, where we had a major international change in law was on the Wanganui River in New Zealand. And I happened to go there just a few months later and canoe down the Wanganui River with some Maori tribes people who pushed it all forward. They created a concept called Te Awa Tapua, which really is a national Wanganui River claim settlement, which was how the New Zealand government settled with the Maori tribes people. But what they really did there was create the concept of legal personhood. So the river became a person. And sometimes when you read about rights of nature, you'll also hear the concept of personhood. And what that means is that it gives nature the right to come before in a court or come before a legislative body like your own and stand up and have rights in the same way that a person can have property and they can speak for themselves or the property, that nature can be spoken for too by people who are guardians to do that. And so one of the first places it happened was on the Wanganui in New Zealand. It's going on across the United States in various places in various ways. The state of Florida is dealing with the ballot initiative right now. Quite a few local ordinances and local resolutions. It's probably taken a strongest hold on Native American tribes and reservations in the United States. The Nez Perce tribe created rights of nature for the Snake River as it flows through their reservation land because they're a sovereign nation and they can do that. And the Yurok tribe did the same thing on the Klamath River in Northern California. And in those laws that they created on those on the reservations, it gave rights, the river's rights to flourish, exist, evolve, flow, regenerate, and be restored. It created a legal guardianship body to enforce their rights, and then the formalization of rights of nature is sort of, really the linchpin of a long-standing tribal belief system, which is kind of what we're dealing with here in the United States, is the same philosophy and sort of a way of looking at and valuing nature that in some respects Native American tribes used before we all showed up. Here in Colorado, you're the fourth community that I've actually stood in front of. 3 communities have passed rights of nature for resolution so far. Netherland was the first upstream of us here. And then Ridgeway, Netherland is on Boulder Creek, on the Boulder Creek watershed there in the town of Netherland. Ridgeway on the Uncompahgre River as it flows through the town of Ridgeway, and then Grand Lake just last year that happened. The town of Grand Lake, the board granted rights of nature resolution for the town, for the Grand Lake. And so you're the fourth entity that we've stood up. We're also working with a variety of other communities. I don't want to put any of them on the spot, but after this presentation, I'll probably be Crested Butte we're talking about next, and that's the Slate River up there. If you've ever been up to Crested Butte, I was just up there a couple weeks ago talking up there. Some of their staff members, and then a few others, and then a couple in Utah too. We're talking to about the same thing. So the concept is to start, what I would call working on the hearts and minds. And so the rights of nature for the St. Vrain Creeks, and this is my last slide, resolution that is before you tonight. It's a non-binding resolution, not an ordinance, not a law, and there's a reason for that. If you were to pass an ordinance or a law, the state would probably say that they preempt you. And if you're familiar with the whole business around oil and gas and preemption, it's very similar to the state really owns and controls all the water, and has the right to and decide how it's used in the state of Colorado. And the local governments don't have the legal right to do that. So we're working on resolutions and really on the hearts and minds and policies rather in the legal realm. Exactly. It avoids consensus litigation, which is very important. It doesn't impact any of Lions' water rights or existing dams that serve your water rights. What it does do is create an opportunity for a friendly community-wide conversation about giving nature and the St. Vrain Creeks a voice in town policy and decision-making. It also allows the town board to create guardians who are appointed to speak for the creeks. In fact, the town of Netherland is actually considering a guardian resolution right now, where they appoint 2 members of their sustainability advisory board to be guardians for the creek. And then it would also, in addition, set Lions on track to be a world leader in the rights of nature movement. That's all I have to say. Appreciate your time. I will say that the St. Vrain Creeks are beautiful and they're right here. They run right through town. You guys know that, but it's a special place and you're lucky to be here at the confluence of those 2 creeks. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Gary. I have a couple of questions and I also want to hear from Mr. Cronin if he's willing. But I'll wait and see. Questions for Gary? No. Mayor Pro Tem?
I have several.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you. I thought this was really informative. I had not heard of something like this, so it's a new concept to me. So I actually do have a lot of questions. I'm not trying to poke holes, but you got to look at some of the concerns that
Sure.
I was kind of wondering about. So I was of the places that you listed, not just in Colorado, but outside of Colorado. In other states, you talk about Florida, for example, what their legal issues are. I'm wondering what legal challenges may have arisen out of this that has made it difficult or more difficult for communities. Is that a possibility?
Sure, yeah. So this has moved forward as ordinances in cities in various places in the United States. The majority of those have been challenged in court. And they were either retracted or lost in court because, again, water is generally owned and controlled by state entities in the United States rather than local entities. It varies tremendously across the country. But that's true in the West, especially here in the state of Colorado. The state grants the right to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. They're the entity that doesn't. In the state of Colorado, the people actually own the water. It's called the public trust doctrine, but over years and years and hundreds of years of state law and the legislature and then also the court system, all that water has been given out in terms of a right system, which is administered by Colorado water law and also by the Colorado Water Conservation Board. So it's their job to do that. So that's why we're not in the realm of ordinances because, it would probably be challenged and you'd probably lose. And in Florida, for example, fascinating. It was in Orange County, which is where Walt Disney World is. 92% of the voters actually voted to give rights to the 2 main rivers in the county. It was stunning victory. And then there was a lawsuit and it lost. And then the Florida State Legislature just last year passed bills to outlaw local rights of nature. And Governor DeSantis actually signed it, I think, in October of last year. So fascinating thing going on there. There's been similar kind of things going on in Idaho. There's been more success with Native Americans, Native American tribes. It's also, there's a tribe up in northern Wisconsin that actually gave rights of nature to wild rice. And it exists across their native homelands, even outside of the reservation. It hasn't been challenged yet. The city of Cleveland gave rights to Lake Erie, which then was retracted because there was a court challenge. And so, you can do the ordinance, the law route, but you'll probably end up in court. And we wanted really not to do that. We wanted more about hearts and minds and policy and really sort of guidance documents rather than end up in legal finding in court situations.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. That
Yeah.
was my concern. And then I'm wondering, so other than passing something that is this resolution, what does this require Lions to do in relation to our comprehensive plan?
The resolution that the Environmental Advisory Board created doesn't require Lions to do anything. It gives you opportunities to do something. You can appoint guardians to come forward and speak. You can also create a, and I think you guys already have like a watershed plan. You know, in Netherlands, they're actually going to create a watershed plan as part of it. But it's really more of a, I would call it a policy guidance document or a statement of values that, so that you as the town board could, reflect what you think the community's values are about, the St. Rain Creeks as they flow through town. It's really more about values and policy than it is about requirements. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was wondering about things that have happened. So, well, before I go there, I'm curious, would this have a potential of hindering recreation, boating, floating, fishing?
Again, it's a resolution, it's not an ordinance, and you guys are in charge. So only you can hinder or change anything
Okay,
by a majority vote of the board. So, a resolution is a policy guidance document and a statement of values and philosophy. It doesn't change things. Someone can come before you and say, hey, the rights of, it was a great resolution. And, you said that the creeks have rights of nature. And if I was the creeks, I think you should do this. And you can say, well, thank you for that recommendation. But ultimately you're in charge of those decisions.
I guess I'm wondering more specifically though, like as a right of person, is that the right word?
Yeah, I mean,
That
where it's
somebody can
cast
say,
as
well,
laws.
I don't want anybody floating on me or catching my fish.
Yeah, where it's cast, where it's happened as laws, and created this personhood concept, then it's sort of changed property rights. That is not what we're doing here, but that is, what it's attempted to do some other places and what it has done on Native American reservations and a few other places around the world. The country of Bangladesh gave rights of nature to every river and creek in the entire country. And India gave it to the Ganges River, which is a massive river that flows through the entire, country. And, there's a lot of questions about, well, what does that mean? Where do you end up? How do you stand up and, would you get to court? How do you enforce this? Which is a fundamental question of laws, like enforcement. This isn't a law and there is no enforcement. It's really about policy and
It's
values.
this really strong statement.
Yeah, it's a strong statement about, how you think the community's values of nature and especially the creeks themselves should be represented as you move forward. And, maybe in 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now, you'll have something come before you about a proposed development or proposed this, or proposed whatever. And you can say, well, last month we passed this resolution to give rights of nature or rights to the creeks that go through town. And, we should think about that in terms of what this means for the ecological health of the creeks and the biodiversity alongside the creeks and in the watershed.
Okay. I think that helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Delman, any questions?
No.
Trustee Williams?
So what is the value added? I mean, it looks great. Lions, the kind of town that would say yes to this. What's the value added? So for instance, I live in a neighborhood that has an HOA. The HOA has lots of rules about weeds and weed mitigation. And how would something like this affect a presentation of that HOA saying, actually, let's not do that? Places that are not then subject to state law or even to town law, but might be influenced. What do you provide beyond the statement that we care about that? What information helps us in practical ways that do not include establishing statutes that are going to be challenged by?
Sure. So, again, there's no enforcement here. It's a statement of policy and value. That said, I know there have been some concerns in the community about spraying herbicides on
Right.
in natural areas and open space and counties doing that. And, a person might come before you and say, if we really think the creek is alive and has rights to exist and it has rights to have native biodiversity that's healthy, maybe we shouldn't be spraying herbicides all over the watershed that will likely flow down and be in the creek. And they could give you that recommendation and you could take it for, whatever you think that's worth. Again, you're the deciding body. So I would think those would be the kinds of things in a practical way that people, you might get people wanting to say, well, there's a pollution issue and that intersects with our interest in having rights for St. Marie Creek. Development issues, how far should you have development beside the creek? It's those kinds of things. What kinds of developments that you should have? Those are the kinds of things generally that and also the flow of water in the creek, dams and reservoirs and that kind of stuff. Might be the kinds of things that people might want to speak on. As a practical, very real practical example, Netherland passed the rights of nature for Boulder Creek watershed. And again, not enforceable, but there's a very active mine above Netherland called the Cross Caribou Mine. And it really sort of allowed the people in the community to sort of, kind of rally around addressing the threats of the mine, because the mine at the time was putting heavy metals beyond what the state has allowed into one of the creeks that flows into one of the other creeks that flows right into Boulder Creek there into the reservoir. And so it allowed a number of people in, if you go up Caribou Road or that, outside of Maryland, allowed a bunch of them to sort of speak on behalf to the board and say, we've given these rights of nature to the watershed. We shouldn't allow, the state shouldn't be allowing this level of pollution in it because it violates state water quality standards. And so it allowed people, gave people a voice, really, more than any enforceability.
I'm more interested in what you do as an organization to affect the court of public opinion. What do you do that has the impact of Al Gore when he's not screaming and yelling? Which unfortunately is what he does most of the time when he's speaking. But if you can just listen to his words, that's a voice people listen to. What are you doing that will affect the court of public opinion that us saying, yes, we would like to do this with you? How do we know that then that is giving us not just information for us as a board to act, but what are you doing in the court of public opinion to change the attitudes from life?
So this, it's a program, the organization, Rights of Nature for Rivers, and we're doing this in several places around the state. And our general goal, we're doing it with another organization called the Earth Loss Center, and they sort of help us write the resolutions and whatnot. And they're sort of leading this effort partly at the national and international level, and we're trying to focus on the Colorado River Basin. So in the court of public opinion, we're trying to get more communities to pass rights of nature for rivers resolutions, and then maybe create a little bit of which you might call a movement, maybe have a conference and start talking about, what does it mean? How do we coalesce together? How do we start, creating some more intersection with, state policy so that this community, Lyons, can have healthy flowing creeks flowing through it. I mean, right now, state water law allows a diverter, and it can't happen here, but it doesn't usually happen here. It happens in Fort Collins, a diverter upstream, so 100% drain and bone dry a river as it flows through town, and the town has zero rights whatsoever to do anything about that. And so he's trying to create a public, court of public opinion over time, where you have some interaction with the state, where it would start giving rights to the river, so it would allow that to happen. I'll make it real brief. In the state of Colorado, there's what's called in-stream flow laws, which allow communities like yours. Boulder Creek has it on the senior water rights on Boulder Creek. They donated to Boulder Creek. So there's always at least a teeny bit of water in the creek, even in the hottest and driest day of the summer. But those in-stream flow laws generally are very junior water rights. And this maybe will start to percolate the idea that as it flows through towns, because the community wants it to exist, maybe there should be senior water rights, and we should be able to have the right to have somewhat of a healthy flowing creek through the community.
Okay, that's actually still not answering my question, the specifics that you do. But we have other people we'd like to hear from.
Yeah,
Like including Sean, I think.
well, if Sean is willing, we'd love to hear from Sean.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Just
Thank you, Mayor. Sean
curious,
Cronin with St. Brendan Left Hand Water Conservancy District. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share a few thoughts. So first off, thank you to Greg and the Ecology Advisory Board. I was given an opportunity to see a first draft with those on the board saying, hey, what do you think of this? Could it create some potential challenges with the relationship between Lions and St. Brendan Left Hand Water Conservancy District? And as Greg said, it was quite sizable at that stage of the draft. And there was some language in there that I highlighted as you well know, you're your own community, you can decide what makes sense for you. So we were just highlighting some things that would create pause for us as an organization. So for example, some of the language that was in there appeared to create a potential conflict around whether Lions could continue to advocate for rivers and say divert out of rivers to irrigate the parks or put its own wastewater effluent back in the river. So we highlighted that, and I believe in this version that language is not there. Let me say, I haven't seen what version came to you. So as Greg highlighted, I sat on a couple of ecology boards and was able to wear the staff hat as a staff person and said, hey, if I'm Lions staff, the best I can put myself in their shoes, this language might cause me to say, I don't know what that means. Either let me talk to the ecology or the board of trustees, or I can't engage in the conversation. So for example, the city of Longmont, city council passed a resolution based on an annexation war that was going on between Frederick, Firestone, and Dacono and Longmont. And that shut down water conversations because the Longmont City Council said, we don't want to provide any water of any kind to that town. And so us as a district that has all the towns, we'd like to convene conversations about how we can squeeze more water out of the system and share. Longmont can't participate in that conversation because politically, the city council said, we don't want to share. So we can't, as a staff, work with the staff. So that was sort of my caution. And I think largely the ecology board was very open to my input on that from a staff perspective, but continue to defer to, your attorney and Victoria and other staff in terms of how they think they can function within that. One of the things that occurs to me or had occurred to me throughout the time of reviewing the proposal of the resolution is I think folks are feeling impatient, feeling helpless, feeling like there is a looming crisis, whether that be climate change or growth and demands for a limited resource, and they feel as though they want to do something. And if I were standing here, it's a bit fortuitous, we're on the 10-year anniversary of the flood. If I was standing here 11 years ago, I think I'd largely be saying prior appropriation works. We know how to distribute water, and that's a good way to do business. And I think we learned in the flood that Mother Nature works and Mother Nature does what it wants to do, but it created a community conversation around water management. And it launched St. Brendan Left Hand Water Conservancy District to do a stream management plan. It launched St. Brendan Left Hand Water Conservancy District to ask the public for a property tax increase. And we're putting that stream management plan and that money together to start doing some things. And we're doing that in Lions, very small things like we funded Garden in the Box this summer within the town of Lions. We're also having conversations with your staff about an in-stream flow using senior water rights. That's a conversation that's happening regardless of the resolution. And my caution about this is, again, as a staff person, I've been a staff person for 30 years and resolutions get described at times as being largely symbolic, but staff people have to live within what's the will of the board. And if boards change over from year to year, that will changes. And these water projects and water processes and squeezing more water out of the system and doing what's right for nature and doing what's right for human beings and creating in-stream flows and fish passage and all these things, it's a long game. And having different views and values on how to interpret that one sentence or that one provision in the resolution can create some bogging down, and some of this stuff either gets bogged down and never done, or it creates issues where we can't collaborate on it. So I'm not saying from St. Brendan Left Hand Water Conservancy District, we're not in favor of nature having a place at the table. We believe it's actually happening right now with all the lessons we learned in the flood and with collaboration between the various government entities and the partners, and you got the Watershed Center as a nonprofit. So I think a symbolic resolution saying Lions does want to have a voice is spectacular. I would caution you on the language there again, from a staff perspective of whether or not they can work within that language.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
And so you haven't had an opportunity to read the resolution in our packet?
I don't believe I did. And again, I'm going to go on doubly on the record.
Yeah.
And with Greg's leadership. I mean, there was a great deal of Sean speaking in and them saying, yeah, that works, and typing in, but I haven't seen the final version. I suspect it was largely what was presented on the Zoom and tracking as best I could.
Okay, great. I think, and I should have said this earlier, no, we don't make decisions in workshops, so there's an item on the agenda later for the board to discuss this. And at that point, I think we'll ask Attorney Dittman for his opinion as well. But I would want your opinion after having read a resolution for sure.
But I appreciate that.
Your
Happy to
input.
look at whatever you guys are considering.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, thank
Really
you.
appreciate you coming down tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Lowe, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So did the EAB vote unanimously to advance this to the board?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Sean or anyone else? Go ahead.
So are there no laws as to minimum stream flows?
The state has a in-stream flow program, which allows various entities, communities, counties, even the state to designate an in-stream flow for a stretch of a creek or a river in the state of Colorado. Generally, those are very junior water rights. Occasionally, as Sean talked about, they can be senior water rights. And so there is a program there. But it's small. They're good people. It has a small amount of funding. They're trying to do what they can. There's also another organization in the state called the Colorado Water Trust that actually, works with various entities, not just communities, but also farmers and ranchers to try to create in-stream flow stretches in various creeks and rivers across the state. And so we intersect with them, occasionally here and there. We're working together, or we're both working on the Poudre River in Fort Collins as well. Good.
Some of the rivers or streams are allowed to go dry at times.
Yeah, and if there's not, well, it all depends on a lot of things, it depends. I could go on and on, but yes, the short answer is yes, they can be drained bone dry, and it does happen in a variety of stretches, a variety of rivers and creeks across the entire state. Sometimes, rivers only have water in because there's senior water rights holders downstream, that's what forces the water to go downstream. And so there's a lot of minutia in the water business. One quick addition I would say too is, as Sean brought up, every place we've done this, we have intersected with the town attorneys or the, I don't know if you have your own attorney, maybe you have a firm that we consult with. You're the attorney? Oh, okay.
He'll talk about.
Okay, all right. And so, so sometimes, and every place they say, I think we changed a sentence here, a word there, et cetera, based on the attorney's input. And so, we're not stuck on this language at all. We're more just about, working on hearts and minds and policy and values at this point.
Go ahead.
Could I add some of
Please.
the question? So Gary's absolutely right with regards to in-stream flows. I'll double down on it a little bit. The kind of lay terminology that's used is an in-stream flow can only legally exist if it's adding water enough to wet the back of a trout. So that's sort of the lay way to look at that, which is to say you can't add a ton more water. So if we as a group said there's not enough flow and we want to add more water, legally it cannot be an in-stream flow. It can only do that minimum standard. And there's a whole history as to why that was the case. So the reason I wanted to interject is, so some of the conversation that St. Brandon Left Hand Water Conservancy District was having with folks, including your staff at the Town of Lyons, is can we share water by delivering at different times at different locations amongst all the variety of water right holders, so that we're not calling it an in-stream flow. And we could actually go beyond that standard and create more water in the creek at critical moments and not be kicked out because it's too much, which is a bizarre sort of concept to have. But we think we're making traction there, including some of the water portfolio that you guys have all asked for more specifics around, is what does Lions own and how can it best utilize it? And it gets tricky and complicated in terms of what are the legal uses and what can it be used for. But this idea of sort of trading and moving it around through collaboration and partnership, it has worked in some areas, including the Cooter. And Gary might say not to a degree that is ultimately successful, but the template is there to get away from that in-stream flow standard that many would say is not terribly sufficient. The water rights people would say it's maybe even too much, but from the environmental perspective, it's not terribly much.
Thank you so much. Any final questions for any of our guests? Okay, well, we'll end the workshop a couple minutes.
We're gonna hear from Brandon, or will we?
I was gonna wait until
Okay,
the
until
board
the
discussion.
Yeah.
I do have thoughts on this, but I'm happy to wait. So
They want to-
Sure.
Kurt Carlson, I'm on the ecology board. I was a parks director back in the day. I'm also on the St. Vrain Left Hand Water Conservancy Board of Directors for this district. It was a long night. We talked through it. From a purely ecological standpoint, I'm in favor of this. But from a pragmatic standpoint, there's a lot of stuff to continue to discuss. I just want to be clear on that. And we had several votes. We went back to the drawing board. I just wanted to be very clear on that. I struggled a little bit because I was supposed to be looking at it just purely from an ecological standpoint. But I think Sean did a great job. I think Gary did a good job. This is voluntary, okay? And the way I look at it, and this may be a bad analogy, is to some extent, it's like the lifeboats on the Titanic. Okay, it looks nice, but if it really comes down to it, you know, there's trouble. So that's just my opinion. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, appreciate it. And thanks to all the EAB members here for your service. We really appreciate it. Okay, so we will take a 10-minute break and we'll start our regular meeting at 7 o'clock. Feel free to stay. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming and joining us. I am going to call the Monday, September 18th, 2023 Town of Lyons Board of Trustees meeting to order. Can we have the roll call, please, Clerk Fresquez?
Yes, Mayor Rogan.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell.
Present.
Trustee Elson.
Present.
Trustee Eddie.
Present.
Trustee Doman.
Present.
Trustee Williams.
Present.
And Trustee Dodd.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We must acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll take a reflective moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. So now's the time for audience business. We have three, I believe, second readings tonight and public hearings. And so during audience business, you can speak on any topic not related to any of those three public hearings later in the agenda. You'll have an opportunity to speak during those agenda items. When you come up to the podium, please state your name and your address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and the board does not reply to audience business comments directly. Okay? All right. Who would like to come and speak to the board? Come on up.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. Appreciate this opportunity. My name is Danny Lefebvre. I'm a realtor in Boulder County. I'm also here representing Simon Dunning and his wife, Lee Connor. Simon and I are here tonight in hopes of garnishing your advocacy in the future IGA moving the parcel at 1022 Horizons Drive from the rural preservation area into the municipal influence area. To give you an idea where this property is, it sits directly north of the cemetery, east of the ridge line, just below Eagle Ridge Road. And they also own a small 3-acre parcel to the south of the property that kind of abuts the end of Longs Peak Drive. Let's see, Simon and his wife inherited this land from their late father. John Connor was a builder and developer here in Lyons, built a lot of properties around Horizons Drive area. In the summer of 22, Lee contacted me to possibly sell this property, but expressed some interest in sharing some of her and kind of seeing through her father's visions. To see some of his visions come to life. During that time, it was also brought to our attention that the city of Lyons has started to develop a comprehensive growth plan. I felt this was both, serendipitous and the timing was right. So we started talking to Victoria and seeing where this was all going. As we know, we've lost a lot of homes here in Lyons, some of which were affordable homes. So I know we all have the same vision for the town and the community. We believe with collaboration and a shared vision with all of us, it's possible that this property could be utilized for both additional density, a water loop that is needed in that neighborhood, along with potential fire escape routes. In addition to that, there is some undevelopable land that could be dedicated for some open space, adding some more awesomeness to this amazing little town, we should call it. So yes, tonight we are here to ask for your consideration to be part of the agenda on one of your next meetings. So I can share with you a full picture of our ideas. I have a nice deck put together and some awesome things have been coming together on the other ends of things as far as talking to some people that actually have done some of these developments in little mountain towns throughout Colorado and other parts of the country. So yes, I appreciate you having me tonight and hope that you will consider us for an agenda item on your next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in the room care to address the board? How about online? Doesn't look like it. Okay. We'll close audience business and we'll move on to staff reports. Boulder County Sheriff's Office.
Hello, good evening. First off, Sarah Winholtz, our new co-responder, she's not really new anymore, but finally able to get her to a town hall meeting.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
She did a lot of great work on that family from Idaho.
Mhm.
You guys have any questions for her? Or?
Yeah, I did one, sir.
Anyone have any questions for the co-responder?
Thank you for doing the job.
Yeah, we're glad you're here.
Yes, if it's helpful, I'm only up here part-time. I've been with the co-responder team for a year. And I serve the unincorporated Boulder County area. And so trying to fill a part-time spot during the week here. Just so you guys are aware. Thank you.
And even if she's not here, we still have other co-responders or so get smart. If they're working, so. Not a whole lot this week, John Campos was assaulted, about a week and a half ago at Bone Park. It was very minor, but, some kids from out of town, skater kids, got in their face when they asked him to turn the music down, so, you know, he walked away and this guy just punched him in the side. And so he's fine, but on that plot camera, it did help us identify the suspect vehicle, and so we, the case, since it's a felony level case, it's referred to, detectives are following up on it, but was able to leave a message last week for the driver who actually kind of pulled the guy away from John. It's, he was trying to hit him with a skateboard, so another win for us for the plot cameras, which are pretty awesome, so. And then going into that for the plot cameras, basic stats are about the same, just about 15,000 less cars coming in out of town the last 30 days than last month. So, stolen vehicles, sex offenders, warrants, stuff like that, all has been going down. So that's good news. And then so the graffiti update. So we're definitely making some good progress. I'm hoping by next town hall meeting or maybe the one after that, I'll be able to give you guys some good news. Let's see. Calls about so far this year, we've had 2001 calls, 141 this month, which again are up from last year, but mostly from traffic and extra foot patrols and area checks. And then just under 500 tickets. That is about it.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Sergeant Sears? Go ahead.
I saw on Facebook, somebody had posted that they had seen somebody that was indecent exposure in one of the parks.
Oh,
Was that person?
Yeah, so no,
seen and caught?
Yeah, I think that was last Friday. I wasn't here, but I talked to the deputy and the lady was all assumption and she had no good description, like nothing solid that we could even know. Like to even take a report. I mean, it's definitely scary to think about, but based on all the information, had nothing to go off of that. He was actually exposing himself or anything like that. So.
Okay.
And there was no other reports, and we haven't, had anything around town or anything like that since. So
Good.
Hopefully it was just a, misunderstanding, or maybe saw something that she thought maybe might have been something. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions for Sergeant Sears? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Good.
Be safe.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So administrators report, do we have Administrator Simonson on the Zoom?
She is not, and I texted her and it didn't go through as a regular text, so I'm not sure if maybe she's in a dead zone.
Okay, well, if she pops back on, we'll
I
We'll
could
put
get
her-
some updates if you wanted.
Well, I will note that, I think we all probably noted that the sales tax was up quite a bit. So that's good news. The weather got better, the sales tax went up. Correlation is not causation, I know, but still. Okay, legal update, Attorney Dittman.
And no substantive update this time. We are working on some RLF compliance right now for those loans that have been out that have been paid, but no ongoing litigation. Happy to report. So
Great news. Thank you. Okay, so then we will move on to ordinances and public hearings. Our first is the second reading and public hearing of ordinance 1151, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending section 13-1-150 of the Lyons Municipal Code regarding late fees on utility services. Staff report, please.
So again, at second reading, there was some slight changes just to make sure that the ordinance stated that it was 30 days from the billing date. As you may remember, this was an ordinance that was going to correct some of the code that got changed previously, just to differentiate between a late fee being charged after 30 days and additional fees such as shut off or reconnection fees being charged after 60 days. And
Any questions for Director Kaplan? Okay, then I would entertain a motion.
We need to have the public.
we need
Oh,
a
I
public
am so sorry.
that's on
I will
mute.
open the public hearing. Yeah, I was like, why is it so fast? I'll open the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak to ordinance 1151? Please, Edward.
Good evening, Edward King. I live over at 228 Welch Drive. I have a question about this because words are sometimes hard to understand. There's this words called the billing date. I'm not sure what date that is. It could be either the date of service. We have maybe a 30 or 31 day service, and it might be the last day of that period, or it could be the date that you receive a bill one way or another, either by email in my case, or usually one follows in the mail after that. So if we're going to trigger a late fee, I think we need to figure out exactly what a billing date is. We get that defined in the code and all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Anybody else like to speak to this?
follow up on that.
Wait,
That's what I want to.
okay, I'll close the public hearing. And now I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 1151 on second reading.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay. So the billing date, Director Kaplan, is that the date that the bill is sent? Is that the date on the bill?
Well, I thought it had the billing date on the bill. I was trying to log in to look at my bill to pull that up, but I thought it was in the upper right corner of the bill that it says billing date, which I thought is the first of each month.
That sounds right to me.
I thought it down there that it says January 1st or February 1st.
Is the billing date always the first of the month?
That's what I thought.
Because it's for the previous month,
Mm-hmm.
right? We built back a month, so it'll go, they need to go out on the first, and then it's the first, and they're due by the end of the month.
Okay. So I'm looking, sorry for the pause. I'm looking at the resolution here. Attorney Dittman, do you have any suggestions about how we can clarify that billing date means the date on the bill?
Yeah, I mean, one option would be to say the billing date. Well, maybe the language would read 30 days from the date as designated on the utility bill, and we put in parentheses the billing date, and that'd be one way to solve that issue. Or if it's always the first day of the month, we could say that. That's another way you could handle it, but I think it's up to, Director Kaplan really and the board.
Yeah, and I think the former would be the way to do it, just in case if at some point the town decides to change the billing to the 15th, for example. Go ahead, attorney.
Yeah, may I ask a question of Director Kaplan?
Yes.
Does it say on the billing date, or is there any other language? I just want to make sure that we're being specific.
Right, that's what I thought it said in the upper right corner. I was trying to pull up an invoice. I don't know if you can pull it. It's bill pay. But I thought it said up there, bill date, and then it would show the first of the month.
And that is the date on which it is billed, the date which it goes to the customer, is that right?
The date that it would be put onto paper, yes, and then start getting sent out.
Oh, okay. So maybe 30 days from the date, billed to the customer as designated on the customer's bill.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just gonna ask that to be repeated for clarity, please.
Yeah, so another suggestion for terminology here would be that for A to read accounts that remain unpaid for more than 30 days from the date billed to the customer and from the date billed to the customer as designated on the customer's bill, and we put in parentheses the billing date. Maybe that'd be one way to define that term. I just want to be extra clear what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So moved.
Okay, so Mayor Pro Tem moved to amend as such. Is there a second for that amendment?
Second that amendment.
Thank you. Any discussion on that amendment?
I actually think it is necessary. I actually struggled with that myself when I saw it last time around, and actually had to go and look at my bill and then determine again from the top right hand side that it was in fact what I meant. But thank you for bringing that.
Yeah. Any further comments? I think it's a good change. Appreciate it.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Any other proposed amendments or discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you, everybody. Our second reading tonight and public hearing is ordinance 1152. An ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending section 18-6-10 of the Lyons Municipal Code, adopting by reference the 2023 edition of the National Electric Code as the Town of Lyons Electric Code. Staff report, please.
So again, this was the update to our building codes for the electric code, which the state adopted August 1st. And therefore all municipalities or jurisdictions in Colorado are required to follow suit and adopt that code. I do think they give a period of time. If you don't officially adopt it by, I don't know if it was 6 months, you're automatically, whether you document it or not, required to follow that code. So this would get us in line just to make sure that we have the code listed, make everyone aware that this is the new electric code. There were a few changes in there that we documented in the cover sheet, such as the ground fault circuit. A lot of that really is dealt with by the building inspector, not something that we have a lot of control over. And again, it was just to re-emphasize what the state has already adopted.
Great. Questions for Director Kaplan? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, so while this doesn't necessarily have a fiscal impact on the town, is there any chance of knowing what kind of impact this might be on, say, a business or a residential? Like, would they find it significant?
I haven't seen anything that stands out for the significant cost changes, and with it just going into, I haven't seen estimates out there. And with it just going into effect August 1st,
Mhm.
I don't know that there's actual much information yet on what those costs are with the actual project happening, because it's just gone into effect.
So we're not hearing from other municipalities either.
I have not heard, I have not gone out and specifically researched, but it's pretty tricky with it only being a month and a half.
Yeah.
To get much information.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? No? Okay, well then I will open the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak to ordinance 1152 this evening? Name and address for the record, sir.
No microphone anymore.
No, we've got the owl. You don't need it.
Okay, Nicholas Angelo, 4089 U Drive. Good evening, Mayor, trustees. It seems to me that the contract financial terms could have been written by the leasing, as they are extremely favorable to. the leasing.
Excuse me, sir, we're still on ordinance 1152, which is the
I'm
electric.
sorry.
I think you want
Mars.
to wait. Yeah. Okay. It's like, I was surprised that you had something to say about the electric code, but
No.
okay, would anybody online like to speak to ordinance 1152? All right, it doesn't look like it, so I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 1152 on second reading.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All right, I'll call for that vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Everybody? Okay, now our third second reading is in public hearing is on ordinance 1153. An ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a lease of town property adjacent to 4100 and 4196 Ute Highway, Lyons, Colorado, 80540 to Spirit Hound Distillers. We have a staff report.
Yes, this is, a request from Spirit Hounds. They're purchasing, 4100 Youth Highway building, which is the old Parks Hardware building. And so they have requested to have a lease agreement with the town to utilize the property behind, the existing Spirit Hounds parks and Circle K for operations, and storage. So, a lease of 3,300 per month was negotiated and with a rate increase of 3% per year. And it's a 10-year lease with the option to renew for another 10 years.
Questions for staff? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I think I brought this up in the first reading and I'm still struggling, so I could use some legal interpretation, and it's on page 5 of the document, 12.2. And if it's necessary, I can read it out loud, but I just would like clarification. I still don't understand the second sentence.
Would you read it out loud?
Sure. Okay. First, I'll read the whole thing. Leasee shall be responsible for utility charges on leased premise. Leasee shall make commercially reasonable efforts to remove and or relocate utility connections on the leased premise as determined necessary as a result of any modification of the leased premise determined by the leaser in its sole discretion. So, I mean, I think I get it because we talked about this, but could you explain it a little more clearly?
Yeah, so if the town decides that makes modification to the lease premises, and there's a separate section about modifying the building, essentially, lessee, Spirit Hounds are required to make commercially reasonable efforts, which just means reasonable efforts as a commercial entity to remove and relocate all the utility connections at their cost.
Does that clarify it for you?
You make reasonable efforts as opposed to extraordinary efforts, right? You don't have to do it like instantaneously at insane expenses. You just make reasonable efforts to do it.
So in other words, if they're wanting to add lighting into the building, that's at their cost.
Well, this is actually specifically talking to, first part is about utility costs are theirs. And then if, the second part is about if the building is modified for any reason, they are required to pay for whatever removals or relocations of utilities there are at their cost.
But we had discussed that the connection to the building, that's 12.1, I guess.
Yeah, that's just the basically that's the connection on the outside, right? The distribution to there. We're taking care of that, right? They're responsible for all internal, wiring of the building or whatever else they want to do to wire up that building. Currently has no electricity. And whenever that building is modified as a result of the trail going in, they have to, make every effort to relocate all those facilities at their cost.
Right. I guess there was that problem was what the words internal and external were not in here. And so I kind of thought that would be necessary, but really perhaps not.
I mean, if it would help, we could
Well, I
always,
guess you have it in, it's in 2. or 12.1. Okay.
but we could add in 12.2 that, efforts to remove and or relocate all internal and external utility connections. If that would help.
I would like that. So I make that motion, please.
Can we need to wait till after the meeting?
A second.
Fine. Thank you. I forget the whole hearing.
Yeah.
I just, before I ask further questions, just a point of clarification, the terms of the lease are $3,300 per year, not per month.
Correct.
Other questions for staff? Okay, then I will open the public hearing. I believe there's someone who would like to speak in the room. Come on up.
Apologize for jumping the gun. Nicholas Angelo, 4089 Ute Highway. It seems to me that the contract financial terms could have been written by the leasing, as they are extremely favorable to the leasing, not the town. Spirit Hound already pays $3,300 a year for usage of the town of Lyons right of way behind their business. Considering the 3 current payments being made, it would not be prudent to forego payment regarding the right of way behind the car hardware property. As a board, perhaps you should discuss the possibility of deferring payment for the right of way behind the Circle K. Charge Spirit Hound for 2 rentals, their current obligation and payment behind Clark's. It's better to get 50% of something than 100% of nothing. In addition, Spirit Hound will have use of a storage building. If the board wishes to pay for renovation of the building, that's up to you. I would assume that normally the leasing would pay these costs since there is no charge currently in the lease for use of the building. Fiscal impact states payments. If approved, it should read payment. I would also add that $3,300 a year is less than $10 a day. $6,600 a year is less than $20 a day. Thank you, members of the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Mr. Angelo. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak to this ordinance? Okay.
I have a comment that was emailed in. This is from Neil Sullivan. Small business is difficult enough, and setting long-term business goals that in the partnerships with the community are critical to business survival and growth. The town leases proposed for Spirit Hounds represents an opportunity for business investment in Lyons by creating a connection between two business properties. This connection will ensure greater safety between the properties compared to using the highway. The details of the lease give the town two important priorities. Spirit Hound's willingness to shrink the size of the usable leased space critical to our business. Spirit Hounds is willing to work with the town on moving the existing Clark's back building because it supports the town's important priority to build a trail system behind these businesses. This trail will be an asset to the entire town and its residents, even though it will shrink the usable space of the leased property for Spirit Hounds. Spirit Hound's 10-year growth plan in Lyons is dependent on its partnership with the town of Lyons, and this lease allows for the town to get their priorities met while allowing Spirit Hounds to stay and grow in its hometown of Lyons.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments to read into the record?
I do not.
Okay. Would anyone on the Zoom care to speak during this public hearing? You can take yourself off mute or turn your video on. Okay, I don't see anybody. Do you, clerk?
No, I do not.
All right. Then I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Okay, I move to approve ordinance 1153 on second reading, approving a lease of the town property adjacent to 4,100, 4,196, 4,206 Ute Highway, Lyons, Colorado, 80540 to Spirit Hound Distilleries, LLC.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second, so discussion.
So. Can I speak?
Yes.
So I believe they should be charged for two of the three properties since the one is not really leasable in between. So I think it should be 6,600 rather than 3,300 a year. And that still seems like a great deal.
Okay, is that an amendment that you'd like to make?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a proposed amendment. Is there a second to trustee Dahlman's amendment?
Yes,
Do we have to second in order to discuss?
Yes.
It? Okay.
So I'll second.
Okay, great. Trustee Edding, would you like to start us off?
With the discussion?
Mhm.
Actually, I would like to just ask, can anybody elaborate more on why you feel it needs to be done? Why we need to charge more?
Trustee Dahlman, would you like to?
Well, I believe that's kind of the going rate for parcels around town. And if they have three parcels, I don't think they should really be paying for one.
So I did think the same way. First, I second this so we can discuss it. I'm actually okay with the amount. Because originally I thought it was individual pieces of property, but it's just one strip of property. I ultimately feel they should pay more, but I feel like you guys negotiated a decent amount with them. They plan on bringing more business into the town, so I'm okay with it.
You guys elaborate on your negotiations, because you guys did negotiate and I have full faith that you negotiated well. So I'm kind of leaning on that. Can you guys expand on that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like, part of this that was expressed is that we know for a fact that we have had for the better part of 7 years been working on this trail system. And there have been multiple challenges. And we've made significant progress on those challenges. But some of the ones that are still the problem has been the Clark's building because of the lease that was on that. And I just would like to remind the community that the lease was it 50 years or 25 years? It was a 50-year lease for $1. And so, and they were opposed to really trying to way to work with the town. Then Spirit House decided that they would like to purchase that property because that back is so important to them. Their garden was really important to their business. They do a tremendous amount of entertainment there. But the value of their production line going behind the gas station, as well as into the shed, which they will be using for storage. And now they'll have in the Clark's building, offices and production facility. So that's going to be a part of their economic development. And in return, we then had an opportunity to come to the table and close that gap that we were having. That was a big one to continuing the trail system. So we talked about all of the various elements and the benefits and you know, then Boulder County, one of our other problems was our shortfall of $600,000. So we've overcome that. We have made progress with Highland Ditch Company under an agreement that we will be able to work with them within a reasonable financial set. So the benefit of this for the town, I think, is tremendous. And I felt, and we felt along with staff, this wasn't just a staff negotiation, by the way, that we have a company who has been here for, I don't know, over 10 years. It's before the flood was established. They have become a destination. They're expanding their business. They're going to be hiring more employees. And I think what really was the kicker for me, I went there to pick up cornhole, the game. They have a bunch of them for the Hoot Nanny. And there was a bachelor party going on in the back. So we had to wait for them to be done before we could take some of the cornholes over to the Hoot Nanny. And these young men were there specifically because it was a company, they offer service, tasting and playing in their backyard. So Spirit Hounds talks about, and you know, they've had 10 years of using that property. It's going to shrink. We came up with the realization that it wasn't going to be just a 8 to 10 foot trail. It is, except that we have easements. Longmont has easements. So we need to make sure that we're protecting those easements. So suddenly it became 16 feet, which we agreed upon. They, at one point, certain sections were maybe 25 feet. So while I understand the concept and I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that if it's 3 individual properties at $3,300 each, that over a 20-year period, it's $198,000 that goes to the general fund. But if we want to take the time and be visionaries, and we know that in our comprehensive plan, that Eastern St. Vrain Trail is critical. And we know that Longmont and Boulder County want this as well. And Boulder County has ponied up the gap. So to me, the fact that there's going to be a better property value that will come out of that building, because they will make upgrades to it. There will be employees that will be in town, which has been a big issue. It improves a blighted area versus leaving an entire building abandoned, and we've had so many of those for too long. So in my opinion, I think this is appropriate. So I do appreciate the question of what's the right amount to charge. But I'm thinking in my mind, I would vote no, because this is such a bigger issue that is a part of our comprehensive plan that we have been working on for the better part of 7 years. And it's a plan going 20 years ahead.
Thank you. I want to add a little bit to that, but I appreciate that. And I think it's spot on. This is one piece of property. It's one strip of property, and they are losing a good amount of square footage to the trail system. Now, keeping in mind the reason that this property is so useful to Spirit Hound is so that they can move product between buildings without going out onto the highway, which is just ridiculously dangerous. I think we would all agree. So I'm personally okay with the $3,300 for the property. I think they're losing a lot. They're losing a lot of their back patio. And, you know, it has been suggested, well, we could just not do a lease with Spirit Hound and we could just take that property back. Why don't we just do that? And my answer to that is that does not engender trust or create community. You know, we want Spirit Hound to be as successful as they can be. They're bringing, I think 15 to 20 additional jobs with this expansion. The property value, as Mayor Pro Tem stated, after the improvements are done, the property values are going to rise, which means more property tax for us. As we know, commercial property tax is, what is it, 29% now? So there's some big upsides, and I believe that, as Mayor Pro Tem said, we have to be visionary. You know, we have to think bigger than what is this, you know, what is the exact amount the general fund could make in 20 years, and think about what are all the benefits that this could bring, financial and otherwise. Go ahead, I'm finished.
Yeah, and I think the points that we read from comments about, you know, government playing a role of creating an equal playing field. I think one thing that we need to really understand about what Spirit Hounds is doing is they're basically revitalizing an area of town that's outside of an urban renewal authority. And so they don't have any TIF that they could do. And I look at what we've done with our urban renewal authority around here. And when you give a TIF, you're basically telling everybody, yeah, you don't have to pay property taxes for, you know, as long as you improve your building for a certain period of time, which I think is an enormous incentive, but it's an enormous gift to these businesses. Now, I don't want to equivalent, make equivalent a TIF and 3 properties for the price of 1, if that's really what it is. But maybe I am doing that. I am saying, well, actually, we're not giving them a better deal than we've given all the other companies around here that have gotten a TIF. So I feel comfortable with it, especially the fact that they're going to own 2 of the properties. And God knows, I completely agree. Nobody wants them to go in front on the street. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So in my mind, you know, these questions about, you know, equal footing for all, is anybody getting special treatment? I feel good about what we're doing. So.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I would agree with everything the 3 of you have said. I would add to that, if we have other leases that come up at some other time and people want to tell us why we should consider, or there should be a reconsideration of those leases, fine. We'll do that at the time. But in this case, I think every one of those things, and for me, probably the strongest has been the 10 feet to 16 feet. That's the loss of a lot of square footage. And so for me, all of that together makes me not in favor of the amendment.
Trustee Ellison?
No, I think I stated, I'm good.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
May I just add one piece of factual information that may help as well? To tack onto what Trustee Olson said, there's not 3 separate parcels or property there. The parcel that's owned by the town goes from the Welcome to Lion sign to Highway 36. It's one long piece of property that was owned by the town. The lease agreements have drawn in arbitrary lines for those lease agreements. So there's not separate properties that are being given to each of the leasees. And also just wanted to mention, there's 2 other lease agreements also on that town-owned property, and they're paying the same price, like a penny difference of price per square foot for the same amount of area that they're leasing as well. So, and that's a rough estimate, but just to clarify, it's not really 3 separate parcels or pieces of property. It's all one big one that we've arbitrarily divided up for leasing purposes. So hopefully that helps as well in decision making and clarifying what they're getting in the lease agreement.
Thank you very much. And I will add, I haven't heard of anybody else interested in leasing this particular piece of property. Trustee Dolan.
So you're saying that the other properties that are leasing for 3,300, those properties are the same size as all three of these pieces put together? That
They're very similar in size, but they're paying the same price per square foot. I think they're paying a couple cents difference from each other. So they're not all paying exactly the same price per square foot, but very close, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion before we vote on the amendment?
I do want to say I appreciate the amendment and I really appreciate the discussion because I think it needs to be in the open. So even though I'm going to vote no, I just want to tell Trustee Dolan, thank you very much for making the amendment.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so we will vote on the amendment.
And it fails unanimous.
Me. Well, that was convincing about the other parcels being the same price basically per square foot, so.
Okay. Any further discussion, any further amendments?
So I have two things. So
Please.
one, I think is just wording issues in page 3, 6.5. It says, this is about the construction. It says upon 90 days written notice by the leaser that the trail construction is commencing, that they'll start their work. But on the next, later on the paragraph, it says modifications to the building shall be completed before June 1st. So I feel like they kind of interfere with each other. Should have
June
one or
1st,
the other,
2020.
2024. Unless extended by the leasers in writing as at its sole discretion. Because if we don't notify them until May, that they have 90 days and we pass the June 1st, but this says we don't have to give them an extension. Unless we want to. So I feel like it took out the one about the 90 days. If they have to have it done by June 1st anyway. But.
Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, this was based off a discussion we had with Tracy that we expect the construction to start much earlier than May, for example. We just wanted to make sure that everything was done by that date. And so, I mean, I understand that there's a potential there for conflict, but of course we would extend it if it was not possible, to give them a reasonable amount of time to do the construction. But the concern was if it was 90 days before construction, there'd be no end date, right? There'd be no drop dead date where it had to be done. So that's kind of why you get both, if that makes any sense.
I guess it does. I didn't know if we should just take out the 90 days and just leave the June 1st, if that's what we want it done by.
I think we want to start by a certain date too, is the problem. So we want them to start and end by certain dates. I think
Okay.
if there were a conflict, I think I would change the end date. Would be modification shall be completed before June 1st unless extended by the lessors in writing and at sole discretion, which shall not be unreasonably withheld. I think that would be maybe the way to change that. But I mean, I can say that in every contract in Colorado, there's a covenant of fair faith and fair dealing, and we would extend it if it was not possible to build it.
Okay, it just seemed confusing to me, like they overrode each other.
I can see that.
I get it.
Yeah. And so I'm fine with staying the way it is, and that's fine. And then the second one, and I didn't notice this until I read it the second time. The first reading, I didn't notice it. So it's kind of strange to me that we're having Spirit Hound get 3 quotes to do the work. The lowest of the most qualified, and then we're paying for it. So in my head, it's a blank check. So I feel like, shouldn't we get the quotes ahead of time and have the amount in here as to what we're willing to pay for the modifications to the building? It's touchy.
Can I
It's
respond
just-
to that?
Sure.
So the
Yeah.
problem would be that the goal is that maybe we could just move the building forward. But we don't know if it can withstand that, and it could fall apart. So it says in here that it needs to be built, and Brandon, maybe you can find it quicker than I can, to about the same thing that it is currently.
Yes, it's such
So-
model, similar design, material, quality, and construction of the existing building.
Yeah.
And we're asking for 3 quotes that way, which is sort of your standard, I think. Tracy, is that correct? It's the standard. You get 3 quotes for any kind of building RFP, et cetera. So they're not going to go out of their way to build something beautiful in the back for smaller space without us being a part of that discussion, but I don't see how we can do that
Well, that's.
that
yeah.
far in
And-
advance.
And part of the reasoning was that when municipalities get quotes versus when private parties get quotes, it's kind of like if you're gonna rent chairs for a wedding or a birthday party, if you're renting for a wedding, they're gonna double the price. And so the thinking was that Spirit Hound would probably get quotes that are less than we would get if we went out for quotes. So that was the thinking behind having them do that versus having us do that.
Which I understand, but to me, it's still in my head, it's a blank check, so I don't know how to get past it either. But to me, it seems like it's a blank check. And I'm not saying they would do anything wrong, anything nefarious, build this, the Taj Mahal there. But it just seems with everything going on with what we know with the budget coming up for the town, we don't have no idea what this could be. I feel like we really should put a cap and then we rediscuss it later on. Or because we know, like the sheriff's gonna be a huge increase next year,
Mhm.
where this has to be paid within 60 days.
I think that's a fair point. And I wonder, that's tricky though, because how do we know how much it's gonna cost? Because we don't know whether we can move it or not.
Right, correct. Or do we? So my only thought was, do we ask Spirit Hound to get a couple quotes now? And we pick a dollar amount and say up to this dollar amount.
And not
or else
to
it has to
exceed.
come- Not to exceed, or else it has to come back to the board.
Attorney Dittman, what do you think about that?
I know it
I mean,
delays things.
Thank you, Mayor. The problem is I don't even know what number to put, right? I mean, do we even know what a reasonable number is for not to exceed?
So I guess the question is, how critical is this to be signed right away? Can we wait to get some information for that?
This was based on their closing, so that we would have this done. I actually wonder if we could say not to exceed $10,000. That's a low number. And then that way, they have to still get 3 quotes, but then we would need to come back, present to us and then come back and approve. So it keeps a parameter. Does that make sense for you? You know?
That's what I was.
Does that sound reasonable? Is $10,000 a good number? Is that a reasonable number?
Might be low.
It might be low, but then that way it keeps the cap.
Yeah.
So that we do not get in a situation where it's $25,000 without having the bid process and the discussion.
Tracy, do you have an opinion on that?
I mean, off the top of my head, it sounds fair. Or also our town engineer may be on the call as well. Did Justin join? He might have an opinion on that better than I would, but I think 10,000 sounds fair.
Justin, do you have an opinion on that?
It sounds a little low for to actually probably complete the work, just, right off the bat, but it sounds fair, and the fact that it would bring it up for discussion later, and different amount, I guess, could be approved later if needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Attorney Dittman?
I have an idea that has some logic to it, I think, based on our procurement policies, and that would be the amount to be set at $20,000. Just because $20,000 is the maximum amount the town administrator can approve for construction, which this would be. So it would make sense that anything over $20,000 couldn't be approved by the town administrator. It'd have to come back to the board.
You wanna make-
Who would like to make that amendment?
So can
All
I
right,
make
I gotta figure out how to do it, but conceptually that makes sense. So you have to give me a second to figure out how I'm gonna modify the language though. So, I mean, one thing I would add that the three bidders are subject to lesser approval. So it's not like it's just, we go with the lowest qualified of three and we could say no to all of them. So maybe the way we modify it is that should be the lowest quote of three bidders, with a not to exceed cost of $20,000. Any bid greater than $20,000, any winning bid greater than $20,000 must be approved by the Board of Trustees. Maybe that's the way to do it.
So even though the signing authority is $20,000, I actually would like the board to make the final decision about who we use and which bid we use.
Okay.
I don't know how people feel about that.
So regardless of what the amount is have it come to the board.
Because that's not in here now.
Mhm.
And so maybe the edit then would be a minimum of three bidders, subject to written approval by the Town of Lyons Board of Trustees.
Mhm.
And I do agree, should you still have the $20,000? Not to exceed, because to your point, you're looking for a reasonable cap.
I think 20 might be too high, and I would be concerned that the bidders on this project would see this lease and go, oh, I can charge $20,000 for this. It's only gonna cost me $8,000.
It's catch 22. Yeah, I'd be okay with board approval
Okay.
for that, because then we would talk about it, discuss it.
Mhm.
But this could potentially hold up the construction of the building if it's something we have to approve. Because they have to get the bids, if we want it all done by June 1st.
This would be, Attorney Jetman, would this be a resolution?
It'd be a resolution, yes.
So it wouldn't take two readings.
I didn't want it to delay things.
Yeah. So can you, Attorney Jetman, would you be able to read the amended language?
Yes, Mayor Rogan. So the modification shall be constructed by the lowest qualified quote of three minimum bidders, subject to approval by the Town of Lyons Board of Trustees.
Perfect. Okay, so that's the amendment. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, let's vote on that amendment.
And that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. Any other amendments, Trustee Olson?
No.
Okay. Mayor Burton?
Yes, I'd like to go back to 12.2. And based on attorney's recommendation earlier, I would like to add the words internal and external. So I believe it would read commercially reasonable efforts to remove and or relocate relocate internal and external utility connections. Is that where you would put that, Attorney Dittman?
That's exactly what I had already drafted, so. We're taking
Okay, is there a second on that amendment?
A second.
Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, we'll vote on that amendment.
And that motion passed unanimously.
All right, any other amendments or discussion? Okay. Then I will call for the vote.
And that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for the good discussion. Okay, Clerk Vasquez, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes. Item 1 is resolution 2023-58, the resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the third amendment to the construction agreement with Horrocks Engineering Incorporated for the St. Vrain Trail Extension. Item 2 are the September 5th, 2023 regular Board of Trustees meeting minutes. And item 3 are the September accounts payable.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Anyone would like to remove from consent tonight? Great, I'll call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Terrific. Now we have boards and commissions. We have an SFC update from the NREL tour with SFC Chair Edward King.
Who lives at 228 Welsh Drive. Good evening, Mayor Rogan and Board of Trustees, Aaron, Doris. And Will. How do you eat a vegetarian elephant? Or how do you drink from a fire hose? As I watched thousands of protesters yesterday protesting climate inaction in Manhattan as President Biden arrived to address the UN General Assembly about our shared global fossil fuel disaster, I wrote you this report about our town's recent visit to the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden. In April 2023, our mayor participated in the first City Summit of the Americas, we're calling that CSA, at the Denver Convention Center, alongside mayors and political leaders from cities and towns from all across the Western Hemisphere. Our mayor bravely participated in as a panelist, alongside a city manager from California, mayors of Cuesta, New Mexico, and Punta Arena, Chile, a Costa Rican electricity manager, 2 U.S. Department of Energy secretaries, U.S. State Department, Denver Energy Office, and Colorado Energy Office officials, and Governor Polis. The topic was place-based initiatives for a community-led future, organized and led by the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, their state and local and tribal program manager, and their laboratory program manager. I interviewed our mayor after her CSA experience, and I walked away with a glimpse of a fossil fuel-free town of Lyons. In keeping with our climate crisis resolution 2021-105 and our town's environmental sustainability action plan, I asked her, what could Lyons Sustainable Future Commission be working on? She said, visit NREL. SFC said, let's do it. And so we also invited the UEB. At NREL, we were cordially scheduled, hosted, and welcomed by Carlin, Killian, Anna, Judith, and James. It was Friday, August 11th. We had a customized 4-hour visit. Have you visited big government facilities? I've been to the Colorado and US capitals, the Smithsonian Institution several times, and the Louvre. But NREL and its people were simply the most amazing tour I've ever had. Are you picturing huge experiments with solar, wind? Those are the windmills up on top of Rocky Flats. Experiments with hydrogen, electricity, appliances, heating and cooling, cooking, hot water, windows, insulation, and buildings? Check. But imagine all of that in epic-sized and fitted labs with simulations and experiments done in their own brand new supercomputer, just about to come online. Before visiting, they asked what we were interested in. We said, electrification of 1,000 homes and small businesses, fast chargers for EVs with battery backup, seasonal peak energy storage, CO2 captured concrete, and pumped hydro storage. I threw that in just for fun. That's a fire hose or 3, but we did manage to bring back some NREL recommendations for Lyons. These are those. 1, they said, make sure our solar interconnection standards are up to date to the latest codes, and be concerned about inverters that are used for connection of residential batteries to the grid. Upgrade all town vehicles to EVs. Have a plan for electrification of the whole town, including future-proofing by upsizing any new equipment in preparation for heat pump HVAC, hot water and clothes dryers, induction cooking appliances, and home and public EV charges. They recommended we triple our electrical capacity by 2030, which is a little over 6 years away. They supported the adoption of time of use electric rate structure. And by the way, we're currently utilizing an NREL grant that has Berkeley Labs looking at reviving our solar storage, solar garden project. But what was most surprising and inspiring was, and you could tell NREL really want to be more than scientists in labs. They want to interact directly with communities in preparing for electrification. NREL suggested they visit us, Lions, to present ways we could be energy efficient and help us with how we do it. How would electrification grant requests look to grantors with NREL listed as our project partner? I also gave you guys a copy of all that, plus a couple slides that they showed us. This is one of probably 50 slides that we looked at. And then they took some photos of us and them upstairs and one of their extraordinary.
Thank you.
Questions and
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have questions, but I'll let others go first, but thank you for that engaging and entertaining report.
thank you.
Questions? Go ahead, trustee Eddie.
The recommendations for Lions. The first one I would have thought I would have seen on there, and maybe it's just obvious, but we do want with me to go to 100% green. And we're not there yet. We have to wait for some other towns to do that. Jim and Aaron know a lot more about it. I assume that that's so obvious, that's why it's not on here. Or
You're talking about us going green with mean?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're really aware of that level of
Okay.
detail of how we get our electricity.
All right, yeah,
I think they're thinking a little bigger than that, like, yeah.
okay.
And we didn't really get into that with them, but Jim Kerr, there were 5, I think 4 or 5 of us from SFC and 3 from UEB, including Jim Kerr, which was, I think, a fantastic upgrade to the whole day.
Okay. One other question, did you have any more detailed discussions on time of use electric rates?
So one of their experts, Killian, was ready to dive into all that. We had a 4-hour
Okay, so yeah,
discussion plus a lot of touring. So again, that would get to this is what I'm hoping comes out of this is that we engage with these people and ask questions like that directly with them. What do you mean exactly? Of course, we're concerned about lots of things, but what do you mean to be concerned exactly about batteries to the grid? What do you mean about rate structure? UEB is working on that very deeply right now and with Aaron's.
yeah, okay, right, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. King?
Well, I mean, I like that they're saying how they would want to visit with us and make a presentation. I think 4 hours here would be kind of a long time. If we could do it in a workshop and they could try to give us something that's more concrete.
Yeah, I don't think they intend to come here for 4 hours. I think it's a general idea of, we want to help your town electrify. Don't try to do this on your own. They have
Right.
supercomputers. They got super large brain people that can help us do it right. We could figure it out probably. But why do that when you have experts? Also, if you're asking, we need money to do any of these things. And if you're asking someone for this kind of money, I think your grant request looks fantastic when your partner, one of your partners is folks that know exactly what they're doing, what they're talking about. Yeah. So I hope I'd love to see this turn into you guys requesting suggestions from SFC and UEB on these items, because we'd like to help you with these. This is why we have a commission such as SFC, is to help you guys get the information you need to make the best decisions.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's great. NREL is a former client of mine years and years ago, and I've spent quite a bit of time at their facilities, and it's just super neat to see what they're doing there. And at the City Summit of the Americas, the NREL folks, we talked about making an example out of Lions when it comes to sustainability and electrification and how NREL could help do that, which is why I suggested the site visit. So a couple questions. And I would like to have them up here for sure. So do we have any idea what it would take to triple our electrical capacity in 6 years? Like, what does that even look like?
Right, no, not really. It would probably be a new substation. So there are some slight options out there. We talked about Cemex has a substation. If Cemex went away, you would have another substation to work with. So potential option there. Otherwise, cost estimate on a new substation. I'm not sure where to guess.
Yeah.
Does that take into consideration what might be possible with solar, a solar power plant or solar on all of our roofs and things like that?
Microgrids, right, there's
There's-
a number of other options out there.
Probably a lot to think about and discuss. And then when NREL said that they want to interact directly with communities to prepare for electrification, did you get a sense of what that looks like? Do they want to give us money, give us advice, do the work for us, all of the above?
Money, I don't know, advice for sure. And they have programs like on this page, you can see the LEAP program that they're associated with from the Department of Energy. So I guess, yeah, to go further, we were overwhelmed and we grabbed this much, which I think is miraculous, especially I don't want to take credit for this. This was a group effort of coming up with the presentation tonight. But let's find out. Yeah, let's find out exactly what that means. Because we're gonna need a ton of money to do this and we have to do this. Period.
And it will be a feather in NREL's cap if they can point to the little town of Lyons and say, we did this.
We know there's money out there. We know that the
There's a
Biden
lot.
administration has allotted $1 trillion towards things just like this,
Mhm.
in a general sense and very specific things. The Colorado Energy Office is working on releasing some of those dollars, goes through them. There's investors who are really excited about the future of what our country and our way of life looks like. So I think it's all there. And I think these are fabulous partners when we get deep into it. I'm personally relieved. I would hate to try to calculate all these things. And they have a supercomputer. So they can do weird things like, well, if we put them all on the roofs, we get this result. If we build another substation, so you literally just throw that into the software program and it shows all the different things that might be affected. Perhaps how big the wires have to be, things like that.
Well, that's great. I think we should definitely have them up here. The more they contribute to towns like ours, the more likely it is that they continue getting the level of funding that they're getting. So I think it's a win-win-win-win for everybody. Any other questions for Edward?
Do you feel comfortable with what you have from us right now to?
I would love it if the board of trustees asked for, and like we normally should and would do with any commission, to say here, let's get this as a project. I would love to see, you have in the beginning of these meetings, the Pledge of Allegiance, you have the recognition of the folks who are here before us. With the Lions climate crisis and the global climate fossil fuel disaster now fully recognized by almost everybody on the planet. Maybe there's every meeting we think about that and maybe ask a question, which is what are we doing to take care of that crisis? Maybe nothing that day, but at least we're asking ourselves. And eventually that leads to action.
Thank you. Do you have a contact at NREL that we could reach out to schedule them coming up here?
They asked about us today. I sent them an email just letting them know that I would be reporting like this evening in case they wanted to look in. And I don't see them there, but they fired back, hey, they were asking me questions about being here. So
maybe just forward that contact along. Then we'll take care of it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Okay. So moving on to general business, tonight we have an update from Think Generator. And I see Paul and Renee on the line.
And we are here. Good evening,
Hello.
everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mayor Rogan and Board of Trustees for the invite tonight. I think we wanted to do a quick update on 402 Main and the status of demolition of the building that burnt down. And Renee is the person in the middle of the storm on that one. So my business partner, Renee Doubleday, who I think most of you know.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everybody. And nice to see your faces. It's been a little bit since we've seen everybody. First of all, lovely ceremony on Sunday. We had the opportunity to be up there for a spell and just, we obviously weren't there during the flood, but it was very moving and just felt really lucky to be part of this community. So that was really lovely. 402 Main, this has been the craziest little project. We have not had a lot of experience with a major spill, which is the determination by CDPHE. And that has been the major holdup. So we have all of our contractors in place. There's the asbestos people who can go in the site. There are the people who do the testing and air quality control. And then we've got our demolition person. And we are honestly just waiting on CDPHE to grant us their approval of our work plan. We've been back and forth a couple of times. And if you guys are familiar, normally what we've been told is that on the first issuance, they have 45 days to review. And then when you just go back and forth, they have 11 days to review. But it's been my understanding that they are short-staffed. And so these review periods, which should go back and forth rather quickly, are taking a long time. So I checked with our contractor today. They had, and CDPHE had yet another question about our means and methods, which is basically, without getting into too much detail, if you put equipment in the containment area, then everything has to be cleaned like basically with a toothbrush, like every inch of every piece of equipment. So our contractor has done work before where you actually put the excavator and that kind of thing outside the containment area. And that actually supposedly makes for a cleaner site and a better cleanup. But because of that, CDPHE has had some additional questions back and forth. So I wish I had a date. I do not. I just checked today and it's still sitting with CDPHE. So we have also tried to elicit, help with some folks, but it's our understanding, if any of you know Curtis over there, it's just, there's a lot of work coming in and they're short-staffed and we're just sort of at their mercy. So I think we can, from the time that we get their approval, obviously, once we have that work plan, we need to get the approval from the town and, do your permitting. But we should be able to turn it very quickly thereafter. So we're just kind of standing by and we'll definitely keep the town updated when we have more information. We also obviously want to alert our neighbors and, let folks know what's going on because it will be a little bit disruptive, but I don't think it will take all that long. The demo itself maybe is 8 or 10 days, I think. So it should be quick. And then we also have had a couple of conversations with Administrator Simonson, just in terms of in the near term, is there a use for that lot for the town? We would be happy to entertain that. We don't have any plans at this moment, just because we thought we were just landlords of a really cute little building filled with tenants. So that process takes some time, but in the meantime, there will be an empty lot there. And so if anybody has any suggestions or thoughts about what could happen there in the meantime, we would certainly be open to hearing that. So, and of course, if there's questions, I'm happy to answer that, but that's just sort of the broad strokes update.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sorry that this is taking so long. I know it's nothing that you anticipated. Is it, assuming the worst, can the demolition be done in the winter?
Yes, it can. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's any restriction there. What this is called, what's called an open air abatement. So the only thing that they monitor is wind. And that might be a cause for a slowdown, but I don't think temperature is necessarily a determinant.
I would just, one comment about that is, I think if it's freezing temperatures, because they do use water in the abatement, it's a mist that they have to spray over the site as they're doing it to contain the airborne fibers. So I do think that possibly could, but just freezing temperatures.
Mhm. Any other questions about 402? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. So when it's abated, what's the surface of the lot? Do you have to put some specific material on top to keep it? Is it concrete or asphalt, dirt?
It'll just be backfilled with dirt. So, basically we will just eliminate all the building materials minus some structural walls that kind of keep the sidewalk up, keep the neighbors building up. So some of that maintains, but everything else goes away, and then we will backfill it. And we've been speaking with our engineer, and you sort of put it back with an approved fill material in lifts so that it has some structural stability. And then it's just sort of a holding a situation until we know what goes there next. But it will be, it will be stable. And I think in theory, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, like if you wanted to park something on it or set something on it, I think you could.
So for future builds, there's not ever going to be then any kind of a basement, crawl space.
It would just be it's just sort of starting over, right? So you would dig the basement, dig a crawl space as you needed. Yeah, so it would just be a little bit of a blank slate, I would say.
Okay. Did I hear a rumor that you're going to sell the property, or it's up for sale?
It is not for sale. And we're just in conversation. I think we were happy to have conversations with whomever, just because we didn't ever think we would be in this situation. We're a little bit investigating what to do. So I think, if people are interested in that, or if they have ideas for it, we're certainly happy to talk to people, but it's not listed on the market.
Thank you.
Other questions about 402? I think, we're all going to do our special little dance to the CDPHE gods to you guys out there.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that would be nice.
No promises. And what other updates do you have for us?
We wanted to talk a little bit about Highway 66, but one last thing I would mention about 402 is that we'll probably cap the dirt with the material called road base so that it doesn't create a muddy situation, right? So if you're parking vehicles or something on it, it'll be, you could probably park a vehicle or maybe put a giant Christmas tree lot, or I don't know, something, but we're going to try to make it so that it's, no fence and could be something that's usable for the town in the short term.
Great. We appreciate that.
Sure. So I thought we would just kind of give you a brief overview of Highway 66, the water treatment plant, both the north and south side, just to kind of give you an update of where we're at. I think the last time we were all together, we were still kind of on this idea about outdoor recreation and the Town Alliance sort of becoming this sort of gateway destination for all of the, as we've discovered, endurance and professional and semi-professional athletes that live in the sort of Front Range corridor from Golden all the way to Longmont or Fort Collins. We had put together kind of a presentation about some ideas around that. I think it was, we felt like it was fairly well received, but it didn't really specifically go anywhere. And so I think we sort of circled back as we thought about, thinking big about what to do with the corridor. We also were responding to feedback from, in particular, several lodging and hotel groups. While the hotel study that was done in Alliance identified it as one of the top sites for lodging, most what I would consider sort of, boutique or higher end hotel groups just felt like that it was out there all alone and that more activity would have to happen on the corridor before, they would be interested. There was interest from sort of like Holiday Inn Express type lodging facilities. And we just felt like at that time, it just didn't feel like the right fit or what we were interested in doing. So we, in that process of sort of thinking big about the whole corridor, we hired a group to look at what could happen that would go all the way from Highway 36 to Highland Drive, which is the eastern edge of the corridor there. And they did a concept plan that included a new road section for that entire, I think it's about I can't remember what it is, 1.5 miles, 2-mile section. And it was a parkway that we thought would be a beautiful entrance as you starting to come into Lyons, that here at the end of, Highland Drive, there was this gateway as you come in. We also noticed that we met with CDOT 2 or 3 times around it, and they seemed like they were interested. They felt like it was a plan that could be feasible. They didn't like the number of trees that we had on the parkway portion of it because of snow and ice, but that was really the major feedback we got. The section included 2, through lanes and then deceleration lanes on either side, so that would help traffic be able to slow down and turn into businesses along the corridor. And there was enough road section to accommodate that and make that happen. So we felt really good about that possibility. Again, I think I mentioned we also saw that it sounded like that was part of the comp plan, at least draft that I saw, that is certainly something that the town was interested in seeing as it moved forward. So we circled back when we felt like there wasn't a chance to get a grant for the corridor at the time because of matching funds. And we circled back to our architect, Trace Bird's architect, and started working on what we call a maker's village. We think it still aligns with this idea of attracting makers focused on outdoor recreation, snowboard, skis, gear, backpacks, bicycles. We've had conversation with so many different groups about finding some sort of anywhere from 1,500 up to 5 or even 10,000 square feet to accommodate their businesses. And so we designed a light industrial, what we like to call a maker's village. And part of the village concept is that it has a large park where people could convene, food trucks, and, kind of show their wares and have events on site. We met, I believe it was back in January, with Administrator Simonson and David Kimmett to kind of show them the plan. There were 2 sort of asks that we'd like to see as part of it. One is that the current zoning requests or has a stipulation for a 20-foot front setback. We felt like when and if the parkway ever comes to have that 20 feet back, just felt like a disconnect from a pedestrian perspective. We wanted to hold it up to the front in the event that there would be, a nice 8-foot sidewalk, big 8-foot tree lawn as you, engage with all of the activity on the street. And we had a conversation about that. And then we also just met with Public Works to discuss the feasibility of a shared drive circle through their property or the town property and back onto ours. And it would just be a shared drive. It seemed like that was feasible, but we didn't take it really much further. We were also given the site plan that Tebow, who owns the corner to the west of us, had, which was a site plan that included a gas station and a drive-through coffee shop. And our current, the town has asked, CDOT had asked for a through drive through our properties, and our properties didn't quite align the way we had it laid out and the way they had laid their property out. So we've been in some conversations with Tebow and his group about a possible redesign and what could happen there. So right now we're in the midst of pricing that project. I will tell you, when we acquired this property a week before the whole country shut down in COVID, interest rates were at 3%. Now, to get construction financing, you look at 8 to 8.5%. So I think what's happening a little bit right now is that it's sort of the market is the tail wagging the dog when it comes to how to make these deals work. So that's specific to the north side. I don't know if there was any questions before I move on to the south side.
Any questions? On the north side? No, we hear you on those interest rates. I mean, it's, it's the same story everywhere, unfortunately. But tell us what's going on the south side.
So the south side, we kind of put on hold as we were focused more on the north side with the idea that, if something in the corridor could get happening, then we could circle back to some lodging partners. During that time, well, we kind of put it on hiatus. We did apply for a grant. We spent a few months getting the whole proposal together and waiting for that process. Unfortunately, we were denied on the grant, and that was for the river restoration. The early proposals, and this was probably almost a year and a half ago, is that restoration is somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. And we were trying to see if we could find a grant to make that happen. Even though we were denied, the feedback that we got from numerous people regarding the river access was to create more pedestrian, or public access to the river. So we went back to S2O there in Lyons and redesigned. I believe it has 4 access points at this juncture, and we are now back engaged with S2O to finish our engineering, which I'm hoping Renee might be able to get a tighter update on this, but I think the engineering should be done in the next sort of 60 days. And then we have to go through the whole process with Army Corps and with the town, and there's numerous steps. But once it's approved, we're still going to try to find some grant funding to help with that river restoration. It's a pretty heavy lift at this point, and but we are going to move forward with the bid. We also spent quite a bit of time with Summit Housing to try to help them, which was beneficial to us as well, with some of their rock that they had to move to finish up that project. And so we've taken some of that rock, which will be helpful in terms of restoration of the river. I know we're also storing some rock for the town as well on the north side to help with various projects.
Paul, just a quick, sorry to interject for
Sure.
just a second, but it's something we didn't talk about. But speaking of things that are on the north side, we actually are also leasing some space for Martin Marietta and that construction project, is my understanding, on 36. So if you see a construction trailer there and some equipment, that is what that's for. I have not talked to them recently, but it was my understanding that wraps up sometime in October. I'm not sure if they're on schedule or not, but anyway, if you're wondering what the construction trailer is, that is on behalf of Martin Marietta.
Thank you.
And then the only thing I would say to wrap it all up is that we really remain committed to seeing this through. The timing of the market maybe isn't right now, and I'm hoping it will adjust. I'm fairly certain, over the next, hopefully, 18 to 24 months, it will. And then I will tell you also, meanwhile, we get an occasional inquiry for a purchase. The property is not on the market, although we thought about maybe putting it on just to see if somebody else with maybe deeper pockets than we have a project that could be really beneficial to the town and really a catalytic development, or something that could really spark development in the corridor. But we have not put it on the market. So that's where we are right now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Tamburello? Mayor Pro Tem, you look like you might have a question.
I have a reaction, if I might.
Mhm.
Obviously, you are a private company, and so what you do is, you know, your business. And I would hope, though, that if you were to put that property on the market, that we could be a part of that discussion somewhat. I do have reservations of it going into hands of somebody that I don't think would be as thoughtful that I think that Think Generation is, and so Think Generator, so there's certain companies that I would be like, oh, just saying.
Well, I hear you, and we're, you know, we have no intention of selling it right now, and there does seem to be a bit of activity in the corridor, and in terms of new acquisitions, and I don't know where all that is going to go. And then I will mention, and maybe Attorney Dittman could mention or refresh all our memory, because I don't have the contract in front of me, but I think there was an option situation for the town to buy back the property to match, you know, if somebody offered us a price, the town would have the option to purchase it back. You know, again, I don't think any of us, you know, when we negotiate all this, thought that it would ever come to that, but you know, maybe it's also another vehicle that, you know, offers some level of, I don't know if I want to call it protection, but I hear what you're saying.
Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up actually. That I'm pretty sure, I don't have the contract in front of me. Also, my recollection is there's a right of first refusal for the town in the contract, which survives, you know, the closing of the property. And so I'm pretty sure we do have that right. You know, not that necessarily we would, you know, want it to come to that, but I'm pretty sure that is in the contract without looking at it.
Yeah, great. Well, you know, I feel like we've gotten this far together. So like, let's keep going, because I really believe in your team and what you can do. And I think there's a bright future ahead if we can just stick it out through this interest rate fiasco. We could get something really great done.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for hanging in there.
You're welcome. And thank you. And again, great job on Sunday. That was beautiful, your speech.
Thanks. I didn't write any of it. That's why.
Well, it was beautiful. And
I wrote a little
Administrator Simon did a beautiful job as well. Everybody, it was a really touching.
Everybody did. Everybody did. Thank you
was-
very much for that. A lot of work went into it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks you too.
Okay.
We'll hopefully talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 3 discussion direction items. Do we want to take a short break now, or do we want to muscle through?
I could use a break.
A break? We'll take 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody. You got a good book?
It's a great review.
Oh, good.
It's going fast, so.
Okay. I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll reconvene.
Yep, we're ready.
Coach has been.
If the audience would, don't make me gavel you.
Talking Broncos.
Okay, so next up on general business, the Apple Valley Water Treatment Plant update. So this is an update. This isn't a discussion direction item. It's merely an update, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Right, if you wanted to, I don't know, give direction, be your choice if you wanted to bring it back up.
okay, well, go right ahead.
So we were bringing this back up, 9 months ago or so, I think it was back in January, we talked about, a couple of properties up there, the one that's still pending under contract. And during that discussion, we looked at the property that's at 2157, I think is this one, Apple Valley, which was the old water treatment, 2186 Apple Valley Road. 2157 was the other one. It was the old water treatment plant. We had survey done. There was some discussion by the Board of Trustees to understand what the various parts of that parcel had on them, what restrictions there were with them, and where the property lines were. So we have that survey done. I put together a number of documents that we had with discussions from Boulder County, dictating what would be required in order for that to be a buildable lot. The survey itself is on there showing where the property lines are to show that that property does go to the north of Apple Valley Creek. It also designates out 3. I don't know that they're truly individual parcels, but in the survey, they were listed that way. 2 of them were broken out, A and B, and then parcel C does have an actual easement on it. And then there's some legal language. Attorney Dittman said that would really be up to the surveyor to read through it in more detail if it was truly now owned by Boulder County or part of our property that is basically Boulder County's by easement. That property to the north of the bridge that is all currently maintained by Boulder County. And so I think the real question was their desire to bring this back to try to put it on the market with the current information that's in the packet, or to have a executive session to discuss if you wanted to put it on the market and what price to do that.
Thank you. And I know Mayor Pro Tem had a couple of questions.
Yes, so I was kind of curious because, I mean, good job on doing a survey. I think it's new information that the property line is on the other side, the north side of the river. And so that part is what concerns me the most from a recreational standpoint and a safety standpoint. So I was wondering, can we parcel a property to bring the property line in so that it is not, I mean, it's riverfront, but it's not on the river like this, and it could be on the south side of the river. Because as a boater, just this spring alone, you get right under the bridge and people are falling out of their boats and quickly trying to get to land. And I've seen them go on both sides. So I would be really, really concerned about the safety of boaters going through that property being private. And if you touch the land, you're on private property. So.
Attorney Dittman.
Yeah, so the only way to do that would be to subdivide that piece off, right? Or if you wanted to create basically a new parcel that would be retained by the town, you can't move property line per se, except through the creation of new parcels. of course, you'd create this new parcel, which couldn't be built on, it'd be too small to do anything with, but it sounds like that's kind of.
Well, and I think the other issue that's been raised is, how do we maintain public access to the river? Because, that's also important to the community. So I guess the question would be, what would it take to subdivide this property? If that's something the board wants to investigate, so that the north side can remain Town of Lyons property.
I think the question would be, would Boulder County allow that and still allow the other portion of property to be a buildable lot? My understanding is Boulder County wants 35 acres. So I don't know exactly what this is, and that's just my understanding from the past, that for somebody to build there, you'd need a 70-acre lot to split it into 235 to make 2 buildable. But if we only want that little parcel, and we can keep the other, what are parcel B and parcel A, and they amount to 35 acres. But again, that would be a question we could pose to Boulder County.
Do we think that's something that's worth investigating?
I hate leaving that, but I'd leave it only there that just sits there forever. Feel like we need to do something. It's gonna cost a lot to demolish that building. Yes, I think it's for the short answer.
Okay. Trustee Gentlemen?
I would say yes.
I want to be clear that I understand your question. You're saying, is it worth exploring to change this parcel, subdivide this parcel in order to sell what is basically parcel B?
Yeah,
Okay, then yes, I do think it's worthwhile.
talking to Boulder County to see if that's something they'd even be open to.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we need to find the minimal amount of red that we need to add to yellow to make yellow sellable. That's what we're saying, right? I would agree with that, but in I think, Aaron, that's.
It's not parcel B, it's parcel B and A together that are required.
Correct.
Yeah,
But how much of it?
how much? I'd like to,
Right.
the exact minimum amount to make B a sellable lot. But I'm gonna have a fairly strong opinion. I do not want to cut off public access in any way. So I would not want to sell it over that.
Yeah, I feel strong.
So. Okay. So it sounds like the direction, that there is direction then, and that is to reach out to Boulder County and see if this is even a possibility.
I have one more thing. The letter from Boulder County is dated 2002. Just concerned that, 50 years from now, somebody's going to be looking at this like we are and see that when we, in fact, I think it was 2022. I think that was to you, Planner Kemet. The letter.
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor Pro Tem. I think the Boulder County planner had an inadvertent date change.
So just for records keeping, because we get confused often by going back, if that somehow could be noted somewhere that it's 2022.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this item? All right, let's move on to the rights of nature workshop presentation. Attorney Dittman, really curious to know your thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Rogan. I do have some experience in this concept, something I did some work on and during law school some time ago now, but I still remember some of the history and case law regarding this. And so, rights of nature come really from 1972 article called "Should the Trees Have Standing?" And this all kind of relates to the concept of standing in court. And so typically only a person who has an injury in fact is standing in a court, right? And so the concept that was put forth in the 70s is, what if inanimate objects like a tree, a river, a fish, a turtle could have standing and sue on their own rights and federal courts primarily, but really any state court. But it originally came up in federal courts, and it's gone all the way up in several different contexts. Most famously and the Mineral King case, which is when Disney tried to build a ski resort in Yosemite Valley. It was rejected as a potential way of having standing. It came back up more recently in the Lujan case at the U.S. Supreme Court and was rejected. And then just a couple of years ago, a group tried to say the Colorado River had, legal standing to bring claims on its own behalf. And, at least from a standing perspective, as, I think the presenter correctly identified, this has been, kind of struck down at every turn because, river is not a person. It's under our legal system. That's not something that can have standing. And also, practically the courts have recognized the problem with giving, an inanimate object standing is that, in order to do that, you have to basically appoint a guardian ad litem of some kind or a guardianship of that object. And you get in the debate about who actually speaks for the trees, right? And whether one person's perspective on what the tree's interests are correct, and whether they're better or worse than somebody else's. And so those are kind of the practical problems with the concept. I understand that what's been proposed as a resolution. It's been said that it's just really really a statement on how the town feels about the importance of the St. Vrain Creek to the town. But I think you can do that in a way that it doesn't say it grants rights. I think the problem with saying we're granting something a right, and it does say, in the resolution draft that I read, that we're granting or recognizing, unalienable rights of the St. Vrain Creek, is that does, at least conceptually confer, standing in town decisions. And so if you were to say that, we recognize the importance of the St. Vrain Creek and wish to the board consider it as part of its decisions without saying we're giving it rights, I think that's from a practical perspective, at least, just easier to deal with from a legal perspective. Not to say that, the intent isn't well-meaning. It's just whenever you say someone has a right, it means that, it typically means there's due process attached to that, which means standing in decisions. And I don't think, given the status of our legal system and the town's processes, that's something we're capable of doing at this point in time. So that'd be my perspective. That one is not recognized, through our system of laws in the United States currently. And then two, by saying that you're giving something rights, it means it has due process, and that's not something the town has really the capability to manage practically.
Any questions for Attorney Dittman about that background?
Yeah, that was excellent. Kind of what I was expecting. And I do know a couple of years ago, we got into a national argument, our corporations people. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Is there a precedent here of saying, okay, well, the trees are people, yeah, but so is CMAX?
Well, CMAX is a person under our system of laws, I think, which a lot of us would disagree with, but that's what the U.S. has ruled. And that was actually the argument in the 10th Circuit case, where a group was trying to give the Colorado River watershed as an entire watershed, giving it rights. And it's basically their argument was, well, if corporations have corporate personhood, why can't the river? And the 10th Circuit, at least, which is the circuit which we reside in, said that, it's different. Is that intellectually honest? Probably not, but that's, kind of where we're at, unfortunately.
I'm curious about how this would or would not affect any sort of ditch rights or ditch companies or anything like that.
I mean, if we were to pass an actual ordinance conferring standing on, the river and saying that we can't do anything to reduce flows, that would have very immediate, repercussions, which we'd probably get sued over. And as the person who presented earlier recognized, what they're trying to say is like, well, we won't do a binding ordinance. We'll just do a resolution kind of saying we believe these things, even if we know we can't enforce them. And so as a practical matter, we may, at least in the near term, may not, create any actual effects. I think the language itself is problematic, because it may give someone someone else the future idea that it does more than it says really, which is to actually confirm
Mhm.
standing and, create a mandate for the town. Just trying to pull up the resolution that that we can do basically no pollution and do nothing to reduce flows. And someone could view this in more binding, terms than it actually is.
Resulting in what?
Pardon?
Resulting in what? What would be the concern of that?
Well, I think the concern is if someone reads section 2, which recognizes, that the St. Croix Creek possesses at a minimum the following fundamental and inalienable rights, that if we as a town are required, according to a future board's interpretation or future, administrator, or whoever, if we had to maintain flow sufficient quantity to maintain a healthy ecosystem, that's fairly subjective, and it could, that's contrary to state prior appropriation. It gets in trouble with downstream users potentially. And we're basically saying we're trying to override the state system of prior appropriation. Maintain rainfall, snow melt, and aquifers. That means we'd have the power to shut down ground well water users, which is the only people in Colorado that can do this, state engineer. So this creates all sorts of conflicts if you were to read this as binding in any sort of way.
Thoughts?
If it's a non-binding resolution, I do believe we must begin somewhere. And I'm a theologian first. And I happen to be a Christian theologian. And I actually believe that the best definition of God is the God who burst on the scene 14 billion years ago, in all of God's complexity, mystery, and ever expansiveness, rooted in relationship, grounded in love. Which means that God is the Big Bang and more. If that is true, then this planet is sacred. The universe is sacred, which would be very consistent with those most recent inhabitants of this land before people from the West arrived, would be very consistent with every other major world religion, including the 2 other desert religions, Judaism and Islam. So I believe it is inherently right to view it as a being with rights. I don't want to put us in any kind of legal jeopardy related to that. But I can be very supportive of something that suggests that this is in fact a reality toward which our species needs to move, or we lose the planet and certainly lose our capacity to live upon it. I'd like to find a way to do it. Not ready to do that tonight. I don't know enough about the organization. I'm certainly concerned about what Sean was saying. I don't want to see it create any legal problems for water rights, but I would like to see us do it.
So it sounds like your suggestion is to take a closer look
At a non-binding resolution.
at a non-binding resolution,
Right.
have staff do that.
We'll see what Netherlands has done. Take a look at the others,
Okay.
see where they are. Run all that past Mr. Cronin, see what.
Trustee Delman?
I would say, since it's non-binding and brings awareness, I think it's worth it to go ahead.
As is, or would you like to explore?
I think it's certainly worth exploring.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
I think Trustee Williams said it beautifully, and I concur.
How do you follow that? Yeah, absolutely. Let's investigate it further.
Okay. Yeah. Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, I mean, I'm again supportive of the concept of this. I think just some of the language based in this resolution, or is it, at least to me, looks like an attempt to confer standing upon the river, as has been the case for, this organization and many like it for, 50 years. And I'm so uncomfortable with that. And so what I think I would suggest, if, the direction of the board, is that there's a way to do this without calling it, giving rights to something. Is saying we recognize the importance of this and how critical it is to the town. And that we're going to include in all of our decision making, but not give it explicit standing. And just re-emphasize the non-binding nature of this from a legal perspective, protecting. There's also language about how our existing laws don't work, and which I'm kind of uncomfortable with. Our requirement to uphold the Constitution in the state of Colorado and the United States as elected officials and appointed officials. And so stuff like that, I think that it needs to be, at least from my perspective, we want to do something like this to to kind of change a little bit. But I don't think, the concept of a non-binding resolution supporting, the importance of the St. Vrain Creek is a problem. It's just really anything that can be construed by either future boards, or probably more importantly or other organizations attempting to change state law and saying, hey, look, Lions did this and so did Netherland. And so we're going to go to court on the basis that all these places have recognized that the river has standing, so we're going to sue in the river's name, even if that, community is not a party to this lawsuit. That's more of the concern that I have.
I agree with you. And I also think it's important to take a position on this. I think we're all in agreement with that. I'm not sure this resolution is the way to do it. I too want to take a closer look at this organization. And I'm wondering if, even though it's a non-binding resolution, it's a resolution nonetheless. And so maybe it's a declaration of sorts instead of a resolution. That might not be what Mr. Walkner wants to see, but I think that we definitely have the responsibility to not wander into murky legal waters with this and still make a statement. And, making a statement too is kind of like, it is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic at this point. We can make a declaration, we can say, the St. Vrain is extremely important to us and we're going to consider it in all of our decision making, but what does that really do? Right?
Well, I think it potentially starts a movement. I believe it moves the needle. I think that if in fact all government is local, we see how far we're getting with these nationally based attacks. It's not far. I think if it doesn't come from the grassroots, it doesn't happen. And I think language matters. And so I think rights is in fact correct term. If we get in legal trouble making that a non-binding resolution, okay, then we potentially look at a declaration. But I think this matters greatly. And it matters greatly at the local level. The creek lives here. It'll be here long after we're gone. God, I hope.
So maybe the next step would be for Attorney Dittman to do some redlining on the resolution from the EAB and bring it back to us.
So I'd agree with that. I would really recommend Attorney Dittman's comments on that, because what I don't want to have is something backfire or unintended consequences. And I know our legal system's not perfect and it can have unintended consequences. But I agree very much with the tone of what we're doing.
Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, I think maybe a workshop, maybe in order for something like this, rather than put it on for, final passes the next meeting, just because, I can make red lines to this based on, what the case law in the United States is currently, in terms of what standing means and why, but it's not going to solve what the board's grappling with, which is really a policy issue, about do we want to do this knowing that it's not enforceable, basically. And if we were to make an enforceable version of this, that it would surely be preempted. And so that's so far deep into the policy realm that I think that's really, the board really needs to be the one to craft this. But I can at least point out the specific issues that could be, theoretically an issue if we were to use this as some sort of binding, piece of law, or I think more importantly, if someone else were to try to use it as a binding piece of law, which is more likely, where, a citizen will try to use it against the town, to reject a project, or I think even more likely that some organization runs with it saying that they're suing on behalf of St. Vrain Creek and, the district court because the town of Lyons has recognized that as rights. That's probably the most likely that, thing to come out of this could be problematic. And that's why you do something like this, to be honest, in the first place, is that you want to run with it from a standing perspective. But again, I think it's a policy discussion. It's not really, I can help guide here some of the things that may be an issue, but it's all kind of theoretical just because it is a non-binding resolution. I think it should be more clear that it's non-binding, but other than that, it's all policy based.
Okay.
If we do a workshop, I would love to include the student advisory committee.
Yeah.
This seems like,
And maybe Mr. Cronin would join us.
Well, I was just also gonna ask though, that as a workshop, I would like the EAB to come back to the table as well. I mean, it's coming from them, and I think it's a great start. But it needs work.
So perhaps a joint EAB board workshop
with the students.
Yeah,
I think it's really cool.
I like that. We'll make it a community effort. Trustee Williams?
I do want to thank the EAB for bringing this to us.
Yeah. Thank you, EAB. Okay. So we'll work on getting that workshop scheduled. Okay. Okay. All right. And then finally, BOCO zoning moratorium. Planner Kimmett, would you like to kick this off? You're muted.
Thank you, Mayor Rogan. Yeah, so this last item for tonight has to do with a recently enacted moratorium on development within the 3-mile planning area of Lyons by Boulder County on unincorporated parcels that have a kind of a commercial interest called an intense use, as you may have seen in your agenda packet. It's as I mentioned in my staff report, something that we weren't fully aware was going to transpire. And so it was a surprise when I found out about it, when all of us found out about it a week and a half ago. I think it was, or maybe a little bit more than that. We're approaching 2 weeks now. It was September 5th. And it affects Lyons in the sense of that these are potentially commercial properties of interest within our 3-mile planning area, meaning the area that we have under state law, the ability to look toward or look forward to guiding their general development direction. Of particular note, of all the parcels that are affected by this in Boulder County is probably the Cemex parcel the most. It's also interesting in that it's not the entirety of the Cemex land holdings, but only a portion of them. The same thing goes with the Lucanen Brothers property on the southwest corner of US 36 and Highway 66. It's not the entirety of the Lucanen Brothers property, and I'm not exactly sure why in either case. And then there's a handful of other properties of interest that we're all familiar with. All the commercial properties there at that intersection of 66 and 36. A couple of others as you head west on 36, all on the east side of town, and then one single parcel on the north end of town on 36 going toward Estes Park. And again, all of these parcels are zoned in some way commercially, so they could be true commercial, general, industrial, business, or there's one parcel that's zoned something that Boulder County has called transitional, which is kind of a legacy zoning that in effect is a former agricultural parcel that is trending toward development. that's the skinny on my staff report. The report itself has a lot more. I also had several attachments to it that I'm happy to share tonight on the screen if anyone would like to see those on the screen. Otherwise, I can take questions. I suppose, sorry, one last thing. So this information of this moratorium did make it in time for the previous PCDC meeting on the 12th. So on Tuesday, the 12th, the PCDC in regular session did have a discussion about this. It was a topic for the workshop at the behest of Chair Drystat. He had asked to have this be the workshop for that evening. So we had a pretty robust discussion. In the end, it was mostly just me conjecturing as to what could it possibly be that Boulder County wants to do with this? Why do we have a moratorium? Is there something secret about it, or are they looking out for our best interest? What's your opinion, Planner Kimmett? And so mostly I offered opinions. There was not an outcome. There wasn't a resolution or a motion of or anything of that sort. Sorry, and one additional item, probably the most important item for tonight's agenda regarding this topic is that tomorrow the Boulder County Board of County Commissioners will be holding a public hearing at 11:45 a.m. And anyone's able to attend in person, or it will be broadcast if you want to attend virtually. As a town, it would be of interest if Mayor Rogan or perhaps Administrator Simonson were to give a town perspective officially of sorts. And that is one question that Mayor Rogan had asked: should she attend, and should she provide a town opinion to the Boulder County Commissioners regarding this moratorium tomorrow at 11:45 a.m.
Thank you. So I want to kick this off by saying that I appreciate you sharing your opinion. I'm not sure it's entirely appropriate in the packet to say that this is counter to good intergovernmental planning efforts. Way back when we started making decisions about where we stood as a board in terms of the CMEX mining application, our main argument was we were not involved in the process. We were not involved in this process. To me, this is the Board of County Commissioners saying, we're going to put a halt to everything while we work with the town of Lyons so that we understand what you desire for this 3-mile planning area. So I don't think there's anything nefarious going on. I think this is probably going to extend the IGA process. I think that's pretty clear. And if CMEX is looking to, say, sell to an asphalt manufacturer, this moratorium makes that not possible for the next 6 months until we decide, working with Boulder County, what we want the zoning to look like. And whether they take our input 100%, we have no way of knowing, but I think it's a real positive to look at this and say, oh, Boulder County wants our input. They're not going to make these zoning decisions without our input. Trustee Williams?
And I appreciate that perspective. However, I still think, given what happened previously with CMEX, that we should have been informed that that was coming before it came. To not have been informed, I think, is in fact not good government. I do believe the fact that they are saying town of Lyons, that you're right. I think they do want to take what we're saying, but it would have been nice to have gotten this information, unless there's some compelling reason not to, ahead of time, with a letter, whatever, a call to you, noting that we're not going to talk about the specifics related to this right now. We just want you to know that we want you involved in the process as it comes. Okay. then I don't even have to have this conversation if they've done that. If they didn't.
Well, we did get, Victoria and I did get news of this before the general public did, but it was literally hours before.
Yeah.
So I take your point.
And I believe it's appropriate for them to state the reality much more clearly than it is stated in what's there thus far. The way it feels to me is Lions is not capable of making these kinds of decisions on their own, so we must make them for them. And since we've had so many issues related to the IGA, I wasn't crazy about the language of it, that's all. But that is very helpful. Because I was not thinking about it from that perspective. I was just a little bit bothered by it all. When you say that, it's like, oh yeah, I think you're right. I think that is exactly what's happening. It was just communication.
And I don't think that they communicated particularly well in the press release.
But it makes a lot more sense. What you're saying makes a lot more sense given who the county commissioners are.
Trustee Delman?
No, I wonder why we were left out. But I can't surmise as to what they were thinking.
I'm guessing, and this is purely conjecture, and maybe Attorney Dittman would have some insight. This, as far as I know, this was not a previously noticed agenda item for the Board of County Commissioners, which means it's what I think they call a walk-on item. And I'm wondering whether it happened so quickly and without notice so that there wouldn't be an opportunity for any sort of legal maneuvering on the part of the people affected by the moratorium.
Yeah,
Do you have an opinion, attorney?
I mean, I can't say for sure, but certainly one strategy, if you don't want a bunch of people showing up causing a ruckus, is to do the bare minimum of notice, which is, 24 hours. And so, I mean, it's not a very, transparent way to do things, but it's certainly a legally permissible one. So.
I'm more hopeful. When I read this, my first reaction was, this is good for us. It is going to give us an opportunity. Our deadline for the IGA was October, and we have not heard from them for several months. And I know Planner Ken that you have tried multiple times. So I look at this as a way to say, okay, clearly there's a lot on the table happening right now, and maybe there are things that we're not aware of. But I think they're giving us the benefit of the doubt by doing this so that things can slow down a little bit and we can have a much more productive IGA agreement sessions going forward. My anticipation is that after their meeting tomorrow, I would hope that we would be hearing from them almost immediately, following up with, we're going to meet now and let's get busy on that IGA much more quickly now.
Yeah.
So that's my optimistic side of this, but I also can't help but wonder, there are probably things that are happening that we are not privy to yet. I do believe the purpose of this public meeting tomorrow will shed a lot more light on this. I do think that I would love for Mayor Rogan to please make a statement to this. And while I don't know if you're going in person or not, you are, I would be more than happy to come with you. I think the more of us that are present either via Zoom or in person, even though you speak on behalf of us, I think our presence was very, that's a strong statement in itself. So that would be my wish, and I am available if you would like company.
Thank you. So just to be clear, you're saying to speak in support.
I'm open to speaking in support of this and seeking a whole lot more information as soon as this is over with Boulder County to start these discussions, because they specifically are talking about our comprehensive plan. And I mean, they're including us in this while we didn't necessarily have full privy of it coming early.
Trustee Edding?
A wise man once told me, never ever assume conspiracy when incompetency can be the reason. Sorry, trustee, should I have not said that?
I think that's right. I mean, that's correct. I mean.
Okay.
Okay.
It was a Boy Scout master, as a matter of
Not
fact.
necessarily.
Go ahead, trustee Edding, and then we'll get to Attorney Dittman.
Okay, so I'm assuming good faith. I don't think there's anything wrong with the 6-month moratorium. I think it's got a lot to do with our comp plan and the IGAs and negotiation. But I'd like to remind everybody, a couple meetings ago, we read through our IGA. In the actual Alliance planning area, we have authority over that land, that use more than we realize. We are at least a referral. If not, we're voting on any changes in that. So I don't even know if this is that important. It has to come to us anyway. And then I think we could also discuss the fact that the interest rates are so high, nobody's doing anything anyway, so it doesn't matter. I think it's a mountain out of a molehill, or a molehill on a mountain, or whatever.
Attorney Dittman, did you have something to add?
I was originally going to respond to Mayor Pro Tem's. I still would like to. I just want to say, regarding the conspiracy comment, I wasn't saying that this was necessarily a conspiracy. I was attributing, incompetence, but I think just a general principle, a lot of times what people see as conspiracies, a lot of time explained by accident or incompetence. But
Yeah.
back
Just
to
simply mistake.
back to Mayor Pro Tem's comments about what she was saying. One of the, I just want to say as a general principle, moratoria are not looked favorably upon by the law. Usually if you're going to do a moratoria, it would need to be short in length, and it needs to be in response to usually quickly changing circumstances, right? That basically overwhelm the ability of the governmental entity to respond to. And so if we were to look at this in the most positive light, it means something is happening quickly and they are unable to respond to, under the existing system, which is the reason why the moratoria is necessary to make, system improvement. So if we were to give the most benefit to the doubt and compliance with, the understanding of Colorado law, which is moratoria are generally disfavored, that would be the most reasonable explanation for this.
Trustee Elton?
I'll take it as a positive spin.
Okay. So is the consensus that I should go and speak in support tomorrow?
Yes. May I also say something about this?
Sure.
So looking at the map, I do find it interesting. As Planner Kemet was pointing out, and I'm trying to go to, there was a better map. This one's blurry, and here it is. Okay. So, it is only part of for example, the Cemex property. A lot of this is general industrial. But what's really highlighted in brown is really mainly the plant area. So that's a real curiosity. And as well as the Lucanen property, I think is quite curious as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is I actually am fascinated by this transitional property. That's kind of that greenish blue. And I definitely think that is something that we really should ask a lot more questions about. I think it could be a very nice benefit.
Yeah, and I think the public hearing is just to take testimony. So I'm not sure we would get any answers about why they chose what they chose, but I think the follow-on meeting that I'm sure is going to finally be scheduled very soon. We can ask those questions and hopefully you can still join. But I have a lot of curiosity around that too, and that's what makes me think, you know, as the attorney was saying, moratoriums happen when governments can't respond fast enough to something happening. And so I look at the plant footprint on this map and think perhaps. Trustee Williams?
I don't know if any of the rest of you noticed, but yesterday's New York Times said a second Biden administration would work on primary climate issues would be steel mills, factories, refineries, and cement plants. Those four things in yesterday's New York Times article. Major areas of focus, biggest bang for the buck. So.
Fascinating. Interesting news. Okay, so I think we know what I'm doing at 11:45 tomorrow morning and maybe Mayor Pro Tem too. Okay, let's move on to trustee reports. Trustee Elson.
Everything both groups are working on was talked about here. At the meeting of the EAB tomorrow. One interesting thing for the SFC, we actually have the youth advisor. So someone called, remember Emerson came and spoke with us a couple times in NASCON. He came and he plans on attending the meetings from now on. He wants to be involved, so.
That's excellent.
Yeah, so it's really good.
Trustee Henning?
Still trying to get the student advisory committee, getting their first meeting together. I have been talking to Chairman Soma. She is requesting how to figure out the names of the people that have applied, so that she can reach out to them and schedule the first meeting.
Oh,
So
We haven't seen any come in.
one.
I think we've seen one.
we've seen one.
Yeah,
You have to myself, the mayor and Victoria, and I believe Kim, we all get.
Okay, so I'll have to go back to Principal Frank and have, they're teenagers. And get them to actually, he's got 10 recruited, but they actually have to go to the legwork.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll make sure that they do that, but I mean, I did talk to Chairman Soma, impromptu discussing their first agenda items. They do want to bring up the parks in the closing time. They were very concerned about that. But then other things that can go on here, this water, the river rights. So I think there's enough to get them started. As far as the UEB, they did meet September 6th. I was not able to make the meeting because of a work thing. But we did get our earful about from the gentleman from Sierra Resources last meeting. I know UEB is continuing to discuss the solar and the farm and the battery. I don't know if there's anything yet to report on, or is it still just in the weeds?
Not a whole lot. We're again waiting for the NREL study. The hope is talk between DOLA and NREL, trying to determine the best way to go forward, private or town ownership or private ownership. And once that's decided on, they'll help us write the RFP to go out for bids again.
Yeah.
Which hopefully, I'm hoping the end of this month, we're writing the RFP.
Oh, okay. All right, that's what I thought. All right. And then there was a budget request, 25K, something to do with software. I don't know what the census and Casil software is.
It's true, and it's already somewhat in the budget from before. That was, and part of it was time of use. They wanted to budget, right?
Yeah.
So that we can do a transition to time of use. And so it's, what would the cost be for both changes in the census software we use for the meters that monitors the meters, and the Cassell billing software, which would have to be updated. Probably a lot more on the Cassell side with the utility billing if we're going time of use, right? You can imagine putting in hours and when people's rates go, so that's what that was.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so I'm curious about the discussion. I mean, if there's no interest in time of use, why would we do that? Why would we incur that expense?
Right, who said no interest?
Well, I don't know. I don't, that's an open issue of should we pursue time of use?
Right, Chairman Kerr has said he thought it was a good way forward. I just heard Chairman Akeem mentioning that NREL thought it was something to move forward on. I did not hear the report from Rich from the TR Resources, but he's supposed to have a document together for us already, so hopefully we're just receiving that now. And that finals out that project and see what he says about time of use.
All right, so that's to be discussed in the future. That needs to be an agenda item
Yeah.
for the use.
And
So-
we just need to know when that can be an agenda item. So, so Director Kaplan, maybe let us know when you get the final report and you're ready to put it on the agenda, and we'll do that. I agree, it's important.
The UEB will want to discuss that they will, when they're ready, want to bring up. I would think it would be bringing right for a workshop potentially to change the utility.
Yeah.
The time of use.
Yeah. Yep, okay, we'll keep that moving. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, as Planner Kemet had shared with us, we did talk about CEMEX at the PCDC meeting, and what's coming up soon, or the next meeting, it's R1 and detached family housing within R1. And how do we grapple with affordable housing in this particular zone? So that's a discussion that has started and is going to continue taking place. I'll try to be brief. I went to speak with Dr. Haddad with area mayors. I stepped in for Mayor Rogan, and talking about the St. Vrain Valley School District going for a new bond. In order to avoid paying taxes, they would like us to vote for a bond that is going to raise between 600 to 700 million. They'd like to have 900 million, but they're going to start with the bond. And the idea by having the bond is they don't have to raise our sales taxes for paying for that. So it was interesting because there weren't very many mayors there, but there were enough of us to have a really interesting conversation. And it was Erie, Firestone, Longmont, Frederick, and myself for Lions. And everybody talked a lot about, by the way, first off, he mentioned all the schools that were going to have access to this new funding if they get the bonds, and Lions was not on the list. And so these rest of these communities were talking very specifically about building an infrastructure that they need and would like that money to help pay for. So by the time it got to me, I was last, and I think it was fortunate. I talked about how we need to have more safety cameras within the school. We need to have more mental health support for our students in the school system. We need more racial equity portrayal in our school as well. And so those were the three kind of highlights. The conversation got a little back and forth spicy. But I think that I was heard, and I feel that causing a little spice at the school district is not a bad thing. And I was worried that if I should go back and maybe apologize, and then I decided on the drive home, like, nope, I mailed it. So anyway, so there was that. And I think that concludes all the things I needed to say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for stepping in. I appreciate it.
It was fun.
So I was not able to make the Parks and Rec meeting, so I have nothing to report.
Okay, Trustee Williams.
Unrelated to anything I have to report, it is my firm opinion that most of the time that a woman feels she needs to apologize or go back and apologize, she in fact does not.
Amen.
Having lived on both sides of the gender spectrum, I can say that the culture constantly tries to tell us that we should. Women are always apologizing for themselves. Historic Preservation Committee meets Wednesday. Was able at luncheon last Sunday, week it was Sunday, to talk for a long time with our new sheriff, also about the increase in our costs related to that. And he didn't apologize for it. He said there are a couple of communities that, in my opinion, received possibly preferential treatment in the past. And you are one of them. And you come in with new eyes and different perspective and realize it's needs to be dealt with. And so, yes, this will happen this year and likely also again next year. But I was satisfied with his explanation. I felt like he was being straight up with me. But I appreciate that information going into our budget planning meeting. That's it.
Thank you. I too talked to Sheriff Johnson about this. I informed him that we are not going to be able to build a pickleball court for our pickleballers because they're increasing the prices so much, and that he should expect to see the Lions pickleballers at his office in protest. He was an exceptionally good sport.
Yeah.
Okay, so I met with the high school principal and about their new leadership program at the high school. So I'm gonna go speak to the students, and we're talking about getting a group of students to come down to Denver to attend the next Metro Mayor's Caucus meeting. Superior has done that before, which is where I got the idea. They brought a bunch of students and the students really seemed interested in it. So I think the more we can support student interest in local government, the better. Most of all, I just want to commend staff and the Flood Remembrance Committee for really remarkable events that were so well attended and so beautifully produced. And I mean, I just have an inkling of how much work went into making that all happen. And it was, I've heard nothing but gratitude and thank yous and kudos. And so I want to recognize staff for that. It was a huge heavy lift and is a testament to what this town can do when we put our minds to it. So, I was not able to attend the last LAHC meeting, so I don't have a report on that. And I would like to, at some point, talk about when the PCDC might want to take on zoning overall. So not just kind of zone by zone, but take a look at the whole town. Okay. And that concludes my report. We've got legal update in here erroneously because we didn't have any legal update. So summary of action items, please.
Am I going first, I guess? So, for me, I had, the two ordinances, which have already been sent over with corrections. And then I'm going to redline, the rights of nature, resolution for, discussion at a future workshop, which will be on, I assume, the next meeting.
Right, okay, I've got a potential agenda item as requested by Danny LaFever regarding the Connor property. Ordinance 1151 passed on second reading, ordinance 1152 and ordinance 1153 also passed on second reading. A potential workshop with Edward King is to provide contact information to you. Reach out to Boulder County to see what subdividing Apple Valley lots would look like, what the process is. Also an updated letter from the county to reflect the 2022 date from David Kimmett.
Yep.
Attorney Dittman to redline the EAB resolution, also a potential workshop and include the Student Advisory Commission and the EAB on that. Mayor Rogan is to speak at tomorrow's Boulder County zoning moratorium hearing. Future agenda item on time of use rates to be determined. And then discuss with the PCDC when they would like to review all zoning in town.
Great. I see Administrator Simonson on the line. Do you have anything to add, Administrator Simonson? We missed you.
Thank you. I've been listening through the whole workshop. So
good meeting tonight, and no, I don't have anything to add to the to-do list tonight.
Okay, great. We'll get home safely.
I
Um,
made it home, made it home.
Oh, you did? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Good
Thank
night.
you, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Brandon.
Good night.